The story opens with Tenno Sho, 35, finding himself in a strange place and unsure where he is. His thoughts return to the last thing he remembers. He woke that morning with a foggy head after oversleeping, but still went to work. Later on the way home, his family asked him to pick up some yogurt. While crossing the road to go back, a truck ran him over. He soon learned others had also been hit by the same truck. Something set him apart. While the others glowed, he did not. Tenet considered his next move. A voice warned that if nothing was done, everything would fail. The summoning was incomplete and could send them all back to their original world. 10 thoughts raced through his mind. Trying to picture that original world, he remembered tales of brave heroes. He wondered if they were the same characters from the comic books his sister was obsessed with. As he tried to make sense of things, he realized he was alone. The others were gone. The voice suggested they had found something important. He was shocked to find one person still there. He couldn't understand why nobody had noticed him. Hearing the voices, he realized he wasn't meant to be part of this, even though he had been with the other 4 people. The voice said summoning was a bad idea because it upset the world's balance. They still chose to use the summoning skills. Tenno was confused and couldn't understand what was happening. Suddenly, he felt like he was falling. Waking under the tree, he looked around, still unsure where he was. His body felt heavy and sluggish, as if all his energy was gone. He struggled to stand, looked around, and realized he was in a forest. Wondering whether he could do anything about his sluggishness, he found the forest dark and gloomy and felt everything closing in on him. He soon realized he was in the afterlife, just as he'd heard, and that he'd somehow been pulled into a hero summoning ritual. He remembered his sister's love of those comics about heroes summoned to another world. She told him stories about them all the time, and he never thought they could be real. He began to wonder if he had really ended up in another world, and if there was any way to get back home. Frustrated, he shouted. Pausing to calm himself, he knew he needed to think clearly and decide his next steps. His sister's account led him to conclude this world might have magic and demons. Suddenly, he realized he had screamed so loudly just moments before. Looking around, he found no one to hear him. Continuing to walk, he muttered that everything felt creepy and wrong, and something had been clinging to his body since he woke up. He felt something slowly crawling into him. He considered asking for help, but all around him were trees stretching as far as he could see. His condition seemed to worsen the longer he stayed there. Since waking, he had never been this uncomfortable. From every angle, the forest was shrouded in darkness, and he suspected a curse was sapping his strength. It may have been an evil spirit or something else, and he wasn't sure, but it was the only explanation he could think of. A black haze around him appeared to swirl in the air. He thought about purification spells and evil demons. Glancing around, he was unsure what he was even doing. Acting like an idiot, he didn't even know if magic or spirits were real. Something felt different. He noticed it, and you wondered whether his body was slowly recovering. Looking around again, he raised his hand and tried a purification spell. Surprisingly, the black haze began to fade. 10:10, stop. He realized the evil spirit was likely climbing onto him, and that in this world, magic really worked. Maybe escaping reality once in a while wasn't so bad, he thought. A wolf suddenly appeared, growling as it inched closer. At first it was startled and unsure if it was a dog. He realized it was definitely a wolf. Unsure what to do, he hesitated. Fighting it would be reckless. Maybe he should walk away slowly. The wolf kept coming, and Tina was sure that if he ran, the wolf would chase him. Watching it, he saw the wolf's legs tremble. He felt like prey and knew he had to get out. The wolf lunged as if to attack, but it did not. Suddenly collapsed and howled in pain. Tina suspected it was affected by the same black haze he had encountered earlier. Fear surged, but his instinct as an animal lover took over, forcing him to try to save the wolf. Remembering how the purification magic had worked on him before, he decided to try it on the wolf. He was surprised when the wolf growled at him, but, deciding to try, he raised his hand and cast a purification spell. It worked. The wolf healed right in front of him. Tenno felt a sudden rush of affection. Once frightening, the wolf now seemed almost cute. Despite its size, it looked cooler and scarier, and he even wanted to pet its fur. When the wolf stepped toward him, Tenno, who was from Japan where cleanliness was highly valued, noticed dirt on its fur. He instinctively thought the wolf needed cleaning and wondered if magic could help. Chanting a cleansing spell, he pictured the wolf completely clean. After a moment, the wolf stretched out as it refreshed. It looked at him, and Tina was surprised to see it was now leaving. He muttered to himself that it was actually going. To his surprise, the wolf began running beside him at the same pace. Tenam Marvel could feel how fast it was, and the wolf seemed to sense he was not an ordinary person. 200 years ago in Harran, darkness engulfed the forest. A rare event not easily caused by ordinary means, yet humanity somehow made it happen. The darkness spread and swallowed the forest. Only the strong remained after the weak were eliminated. The wolf Tenam had encountered was King Fenrir, who had watched over the forest for 2 centuries and witnessed countless deaths. His magic was strong enough to hold off the darkness for a while. The purification magic he used to keep the darkness at bay was only a temporary fix, and chanting the spells drained his magic. Repeating them over and over drained his power at an alarming rate. He had been doing it for years and had nearly used up all his magic. Fenrir realized he wouldn't survive much longer at this pace. As his strength faded, he sensed humans nearby, and a surge of frustration made him determined to slaughter every last one before he died. Sensing a human nearby, he rushed forward to attack, intent on killing. Then he met Tenno. Fenrir froze, frustration boiling inside him. He could hardly believe it. He hadn't expected to be this weak, and yet he stood on the verge of collapse. Fenrir saw Tina signaling him to stay away. Darkness was swallowing him, and he couldn't afford to lose consciousness just yet. Overwhelmed by frustration, he collapsed. Tenon will witness Fenrir's fall, rush to his side, and use purification magic on him. Fenrir realized that although the effect was temporary, the magic was working better than you expected. No visible wounds showed, and he marveled at Tenel's overflowing magical power. It surged through Fenrir's body and healed him. I had never seen such precise and limitless magic before. For the first time, Fenrir realized he had made a person his master, and he had no trouble obeying. The scene shifted to Tenno and Fenrir running together, with Tenno invigorated by the lighter air. The magic restored both him and the wolf. They paused by a cave, its entrance cloaked in black mist. Fen came back to him, seeming to ask if he wanted to go in. Tendon approached the cave cautiously, muttering that it looked shady and made him uneasy, and he preferred not to go inside. As Fenrir approached, Tenel laughed and said he was only joking. Using resolve, Tino cast purification magic on the cave at the. He tried to drive off the black mist. Reaching out, he touched the entrance, but the curse didn't lift. He wondered how large the place really was and what lay inside. As the Ten stepped into the cave, several pairs of glowing eyes stared back at him. Ten wondered if this was where Fenrir and the other wolves lived. A few wolves growled and roared, but Fenrir silenced them with a commanding presence. Tino realized at once that all the wolves were cursed, and was determined to help by using his purification magic on them. As he moved, he saw the lifeless bodies of other wolves that had not survived. With no other option, he had to make this work somehow. Picture the curse fading more clearly as he channels all his energy into the magic and casts the purification spell again. Relief washed over him as the curse lifted from the wolves, cleansing them. Among them, he noticed one dog, but all of them were filthy and tainted by the curse. Sadness filled their eyes, and he wondered whether they understood what he was trying to do. The cleansing spell hit them again, and as the magic washed over them, the wolves inside the dog were freed from their curse. Tina realized they were all friends, bound by shared suffering. Feeling accomplished, 10 of us stood there, deciding what to do next. Looking ahead, he saw 2 paths leading deeper into the cave. He turned to Fenrir and asked whether he knew what lay down those paths. Fenrir shook his head, showing he had no idea. Tina realized the wolves understood his language, and for the first time, he wondered whether he could really rely on them for guidance. Deeper in the cave, the darkness felt heavier with every step. The curse was growing stronger, and he was sure there was a reason. Repeatedly casting the purification magic, he found the curse still felt endless, a force that would never fade. Seeing the wolves still struggling under the curse despite his efforts, he knew he had to act fast to protect them, and his mind raced until he thought to create a barrier. Knowing it would be hard, he had to act fast before the curse overwhelmed them. He tried to form a barrier around all of them. Noting that it appeared to have worked, he wondered whether the barrier would hold up against physical attacks as well. Unsure what lay outside, he thought strengthening the barrier might help so it could withstand both physical and magical attacks. Worth a shot, he tried, but Fenris. They only looked at him. 10 of them said he had just reinforced the barrier, so they should be safe. Inside, Dicky found the K was much bigger than he had expected. He should be able to do something with his magic in this situation. Thinking about night vision or clairvoyance, he found neither useful and didn't know what image to focus on. Soon he realized it was only a matter of recognizing the shape of his surroundings. He used night vision and spatial awareness, which felt. It felt incredibly real, and though it existed only in his mind, he said he would purify every inch of the area. He activated his purification magic. He went further and reinforced the barrier around the space. Watching the wolves all looking ahead, he noticed. Toward a giant boulder, suddenly, something on it began to glow. He wondered if something had hit the barrier. The defending defender asked if the boulder was cursed. Fenrir looked blank and Tenem realized there was no immediate answer. Slowly drawing nearer to the boulder, he grew more uneasy. After a while, Fenrir's aggressive expression made him think the rock might be alive, since its behavior reminded him of the first time they met. They then decided to purify the rock. He considered focusing more on imagining the purifying rock. Rather than picturing it fading like in movies and commercials, he knew that wouldn't work on a stubborn rock, so he pictured something persistent slowly chipping away until it was gone for good. After finishing his work, he cast a purification spell on the rock, and it slowly faded away. He was surprised to find a bird lying there. Slowly the bird rose, flapping its wings and purring. His hand was touched, but it was covered in blood. He believed regenerating a wound was different from healing damaged cells and closing wounds. First, he cast a healing spell, then used cleansing magic on the bird. Before long, the bird seemed fully healed and looked beautiful, though it remained sadly small. The bird pecked at Tenno's hand, showing the hand still hurt. Apologizing, he gently stroked the bird. Tenno looked forward to taking a short break as sitting down, he found it odd, but the battle kept shining in his mind. He realized he still didn't understand many things. Deciding to strengthen the barrier, he looked outside. He saw a black, tattoo-like shadow trying to get through the barrier. The barrier attacked the shadow, forcing it to retreat. Ten and the others looked around, considered the magic, and decided to leave it for now. The barrier's strength reassured him somewhat, but one thing still puzzled him. No improvement was apparent. Lance Defender looked tired. Tino figured he hadn't eaten since they arrived and wondered if he'd been too busy with something else. 10 of them sat there as well, and he was unsure what he could do. At that moment, his main concern was finding a safe place to sleep and getting food and water. Knowing he had to survive, he focused only on the essentials and reminded himself to stay alive and avoid any foolish action that could get him killed. The cave felt like one of the best places to relax. Purifying the entire cave would let him sleep peacefully. To do that, he had to identify the black shadow. Its reaction with the barrier suggested it came from outside the cave. Each time the shadow appeared, he felt uneasy and knew he had to act. After a moment, he realized he couldn't purify it without first understanding what it was. First, he needed a better view of the whole cave. Wondering if the magic he had used before he gained spatial awareness could do that, he tried to use it. The shadows were so dense it was hard to see through them, yet he could still make out another space deeper in the cave. He could only see inside the barrier, and beyond it he couldn't make out anything. It occurred to him that something like farsightedness or clairvoyance might work. What he needed was magic to let him see the cave from a new angle. A device like a drone or a video camera. I remembered how beautiful a drone's aerial shot of a sunset looked on TV. The image lingered, prompting him to try clairvoyance. A screen appeared in front of him, startling him, but it worked. Through the screen, he saw a massive rock mountain, but its entrance was surprisingly small. Concentrating on purifying the area, he imagined he could cleanse the entire space. Unsure if curses could be reversed, he considered whether purifying the shadow would send the curse back to its source. Acting on that thought, he cast purification magic and reinforced the barrier. While he did that, the wolves circled him, watching closely. Something felt like it was leaving his body, and he wondered if it was the magic. The black curse was lifting from the plants, and everything began to feel perfect and free of it. An hour later, he noticed the shadow had come back. Looking closer, he saw it coming up from the ground. It was incredibly irritating, and he knew he'd have to purify it again. The curse was broader and deeper this time, so he decided to cover the ground with the barrier, forcing the curse back to its source. He kept purifying the land. Eventually, he sat down, mentally drained but not physically tired. Trembling, he tried to decide what to do next. All he wanted was to go back home. Fenrir sat down beside him, and Tenno gently stroked its fur, unsure if it was truly a wild animal. It calmed him more than he expected. He reminded himself that no matter how much he worried or how pessimistic he felt, he had to keep moving forward. Fenrir's weight was hard to bear, but it still brought him some comfort. That night the scene moved to a distant castle. A stone floated over a strange magic circle, and a nearby man noticed something odd. A man went to the king and told him that something strange was happening in the forest. People had seen a white light coming from the center of the forest, the keen man. This was the final struggle of the forest's king before he died, and then commanded the man to sacrifice more blood to the enchanted stone. The man accepted the order, and the king said they were close to taking control of the forest, the center of the world. Long ago, those beasts had a powerful king in the forest, but that memory was long gone. It was time for them all to die and be honored. Lives dedicated to the emperor for such a great cause. One day the king asked the man what was happening to the forest. Nothing had changed in the forest for decades, and the king wondered what was happening. Invelis cast a complex magic ice spell over the whole forest, causing many holy beasts to vanish as demons began to emerge. A man said that for the past 200 years, no country had dared to fight the envelopes, and because of that some countries around the forest had vanished entirely. He added that the kingdom of Envelis might have sacrificed hundreds of thousands of lives to its evil magi. He said he was afraid there was nothing they could do about it. Although reluctant to accept it, the man knew humans would soon dominate the world. They left muttering that Envela's kingdom would eventually disappear like the others, and he hoped the god of creation might help them. At the same time, Tina woke up and stretched his body. Relief and joy washed over him as he looked up at the blue sky. Looking at Fenrir, he thought that once Tino finished purifying, Fenrir would likely leave. He had enjoyed himself. He asked Fenrir to stay with him. Trying to understand Fenrir's response, Tenna wonders if he should give Fenrir a name. At their first meeting, what stood out was Fenrir's white, silvery fur, so he named him Ko. Two more wolves had the same fur color, so he named the female So and the male Hio. He named a black wolf Kuru and the last white wolf Shan, and felt a little odd naming so many wolves, but a dog was also in the group, and he named it Chai. He looked at the bird, admired the soft gradient of its feathers and its pleasant song, and decided to name it Karen. Pleased with his naming sense, he briefly thought he almost remembered something important, but quickly dismissed it as unimportant. It was time to focus on the present, he told himself, while Fenrir looked clearly puzzled that he had been given a name. One of the wolves asked him what the human head had said, and he replied that Tenno had given them all names. Without him, their Fenrir race would have been wiped out. He added he had exceptionally strong magical and healing powers. They would benefit from staying by his side, since Tenno had regained his magic powers. So they were to obey him as their lord. He turned the chair and asked it what it thought. Cher said he'd been treated well by everyone, so there was no reason not to obey his orders. He added that with the strength they received from their lord, they would do their best to serve him. 10 of them asked Ko if he knew of any water sources. With everyone looking at him, he clarified he was asking where to find water. Kuru and Shin went ahead to guide him. Tenno asked them to wait while he followed. He noted that even after passing the barrier, they kept moving forward. When they reached the water, Tina saw that it was filthy. He doubted it was really water. Kuru and Cheyenne seemed comfortable with it. He noted that even if he purified it, it still seemed strange. He gently patted Kuru and Shin on their heads to show his appreciation. Tana realized he couldn't purify the water until he recovered. They began moving away from the water, and he said using it did not seem feasible. I wish they could get spring water inside the barrier, or better yet, pure water from Japan. Looking at his hand, he thought of water, and it suddenly appeared in his palm. Tenno marveled at the water that appeared in his palm when he imagined it. Magic was truly amazing. He wondered if he could make something he wanted to eat. Then he asked whether he could make judon with a soft-boiled egg, extra sauce, and extra red ginger. Nothing appeared. He sighed and said it's impossible with cooked food. Asking for cabbage got him nowhere. Then he asked for chicken meat and a naple, but got the same result. He realized he might not be able to create things that don't exist in this world, so he decided to look for food nearby instead. Looking up at the rocky mountain, he thought that if he was going to use it as a base, he should secure the surrounding area. I wish the nearby trees had nuts or fruit. I spotted some mushrooms, didn't touch them, and walked away. Examining the branches, he saw no flowers, fruit, or nuts, just trees. Unable to find anything, he feared he would starve to death. Suddenly you appeared from behind, followed by Ko, who seemed angry at them. Then Hio, Kuru, and Cheyenne ran off, and Tenna wondered where they were headed. Tenno looked at Ko, unsure what his low growls meant, as if the wolf was trying to say something. Although Ko answered calmly, Tino still couldn't quite grasp what he meant and realized Ko must be troubled too. He gently patted Ko and said they'll all be back soon. Let's keep looking for food. Bye. Deep down, Tenet doubted they would come back. He said out loud that there was nothing good about the trees all around, and by now he was getting hungry. If he couldn't find any nuts or fruits in this world, he didn't know what he'd do. A new cave suddenly came into view. Remember that the cave he'd been in since that morning was hard to reach, perched on a high ledge. This new cave looked like a much better place to live, but he knew he couldn't approach it carelessly. Choosing to use his spatial awareness, he examined the cave. He found it was quite wide and had an upward passage rising 3 stories. There was plenty of room underground. A surge of excitement rose at the thought of exploring it. Just as Tenno pictured the possibilities, he heard the wolves returning and smiled, relieved they had come back. To his surprise, they had brought the corpse of a giant beast. Astonished, Tenno asked them all to bring it for him. They looked at him, excited, and he couldn't help but feel sad. The giant beast they'd brought was clearly meant to feed him. Not as excited as they were to eat it, he knew he had no choice and had to eat it. Embracing the 3 walls, he felt happy and grateful. Then they wondered who would dismantle the carcass. The first thing he decided to do was thoroughly clean every nook and cranny of the meat. Imagining a vacuum cleaner, he purified the beast completely. Focusing on the filth and impurities, he kept sending the curse back to its source. With everything cleared away, the meat finally seemed ready to eat and looked delicious. Tenno thought it looked like a wild boar, but he wasn't sure and it could have been some kind of monster. Looking at Ko, he thought the wolf Ai was some kind of monster. As Ko began to approach the wild boar, Tenon found it cute and amusing. He thought that, given the state of the boar, you could bite into it. Tenon knew that if nobody else dismantled it, he would have to do it himself. Looking at the walls, he told the others they didn't have to keep staring at them so much. Let's begin eating. He wondered how to break down the meat and whether he could preserve it so it would not spoil. Thinking of the cooling power of the luxury fridge he bought on payday, he used refrigeration magic on it. He felt satisfied at first, then realized he needed to train the blood. Unease nagged him, making him think it was completely unreasonable and wonder if magic could help. Seeing blood as water, he considered draining it. He dismissed the idea at once, knowing it would just dry up. Touching the boar's body, he focused on its internal organs. Imagining the inside brought him a wave of nausea. Ko wondered what the lore had been up to. Chase suggested something might have displeased him. Heya said it probably happened while the boar was still warm. Disappointed, they all looked at him, while Tenna studied the blood vessels and internal organs, thinking how to remove them all. At first they decided to quickly remove and cauterize the blood vessels, which seemed like a good enough solution. Ko told the others that, unlike them, Tenem lacked claws and tusks and would struggle to eat. They all agreed that if ordered to, they would cut everything. The Tenno moved instantly. As something emerged from the boar's back, the wolves seemed excited. Suddenly Ten will burn the material, shocking everyone. After he cleared the ash, they all looked at him with disappointed faces. Tenup said he would clean it with cleansing magic and get rid of the meat's bad smell. I'd cut up a fish before, but an animal like this had many internal organs, such as, including the liver, kidneys, brain, and eyes. Unable to stop imagining them, he moved instantly again. The liver was forced out, and the wolves grew excited, drawn by the scent. Tenno burned the liver, shocking them all, and he thought to himself. Since it went well, he decided to close his eyes the next time he performed the process. He could cool or burn things at will, and also use magic to control natural phenomena. Tenno told the wolves he was going to remove the remaining innards and asked for some space. Seeing their disappointed faces, he asked why they looked upset. He used wind magic to slice through the wild boar's carcass. Then he realized he'd forgotten to take off the fur. Taking some meat for himself, he told the wolves to help themselves too. Call out those who brought it first so they can take their share. She asked Ko if it was okay for him to eat a little too. Ko agreed, telling him they all had to keep going until the bountiful forest returned. Boldly put, if said plainly, they all shared the same small fate. Chi said that Ko certainly had a lot of wisdom. Coven asked whether Chi had forgotten he was also king of the dire wolves. Che admitted he wasn't a king, only a worthless leader who couldn't even protect his friends. Ko reassured him that the child would find him safely. Then he started eating the meat, implying that since they had received their long-awaited names, they should also use those names when addressing each other. 10 ovens roared as he burned all the meat and told Ko he wanted a little more. Taking the extract, he set it on a stone and said it was no good because it had turned to charcoal, like the meat from earlier. He took his time, warming it with infrared radiation, and he began to cook it slowly, and as the wolves ate the raw meat, they smelled the cooked meat and looked at Tenno. Tenno met their gaze and smiled, sure he had made the right choice by placing it on the stone. It had browned nicely. He picked up the stone and stabbed it into the meat, finding it was very hard and slightly burnt. Then he began to eat, teasing that he wouldn't share it. Something strange was happening on a nearby rock. Entering the cave with the wolves, he decided to explore it first to secure it as a base. The space between the outer surface and the cave interior looked normal. There were no signs of life inside. With the high ceiling, he decided to make the first floor the main room and considered combining it with where he'd been the day before, which would give him a Forcetura mansion. The first level was a vast underground layer with a high ceiling. He realized the space stretched far back. Curious about the sparkle on the back wall, he found no sign of life there. The floor looked solid, but the real concern was what lay beneath. Using his spatial awareness again, he confirmed there was something underneath. He wondered how long the barrier he had cast the day before would last. He knew he had to learn more about the magic soon. Deciding to check below first, he hugged Ko and said he didn't want to go down. After being colicked, he said he felt better and was now ready to. Descending, the Tenno discovered a heavy concentration of shadow curse lingering in the area. Sensing something, it began to glow toward it. The curse tightened around him, so Tina hurried to cast purification magic. The barrier he'd set earlier reacted unexpectedly, and he began to doubt whether the purification had worked. As the curse began to fade, Tenet wondered whether they had succeeded and why nothing else was nearby. This curse echoed the one that had surrounded Karen before, and he thought there might be more to it. Then he spotted a spider that puzzled him because it had wings. Putting it aside for now, he focused on countering the black curse, using purification began on it as the curse continued to fade. The spider watched them, and Tenon realized it was emerging from the ground, so he knew he had to purify it properly. Closer inspection revealed a chief spider and 20 smaller ones. A closer look made him note that the world had bugs too. He wondered if these were monster variants. People often said spiders were useful. He paused because this one had wings. It wasn't a typical spider. Ko looked closer and noted it was impressive that it had survived this long. A sudden gust blew the chief spider onto Tino's hair. The smaller spiders crawled onto Kai and bothered him. Tina realized they didn't seem very harmful and mentioned it. They found the second layer of the cave was also spacious, so they planned to check the blocks and crannies later. Earlier he had only shouted the purification spell, and even without a clear mental image, the magic still worked. His sister had told him that a clear mental image was crucial to cast magic, but he wondered if the same was true here. Trying something different, he stopped imagining and just said fire. Nothing happened. Without a clear image in his mind, he wondered why, then tried again with water. I saw some liquid in your purchase. Focusing on the fire in his mind, he said the words again. This time, the magic worked. The fire startled the wolves. Realizing the magic worked when he imagined it, he wondered what changed when he did not. While saying the word fire, he tried to picture water, and the fire appeared again. He wondered whether using the new magic required a clear mental image. Stepping forward, he noticed the magic moved with him and suspected that once a word was tied to it, that word would take priority and remain linked to that image, which seemed convenient though he wasn't sure. While thinking this, he saw a crack in the cave wall and realized what was coming through it. Touching the crack, he thought the space inside might be roomy, but there were no signs of curses, and he couldn't see anything inside. Wondering if Blake could help, he pictured him as a ball of light. He created it. It was so bright that Coast squinted and felt pressure in his eyes. Tenon apologized for that, then tried to shrink the light but found adjusting the magic tiring, so he asked the wolves if they were worried. Later, he leaned over the crack to look inside and said he could see sparkling rocks. Curious about what they were, he watched as the spider's head poked in and brought back a small piece of stone. Tenor recognized it as silverstone, a beautiful material. Calling the spider chief, he thanked it for the gift. Then he realized it was right to call the spider chief. The wolves were staring at the stone for some reason, and Tenet wondered whether it was rare. Beautiful as it was, he had no immediate use for it. He slipped it into his jacket. Walking on, Tenno said the other floors might hold shiny things, but it didn't matter right then. Shine told Kuru that Tenno stayed calm when he saw the mithril. Toru wondered whether Tenno was really human. Realizing there were no more cracks or openings to explore, he knew the conquest of the Rocky Mountain was complete. He hadn't checked his bag before, but when he did he found a few items he didn't think would be useful, and when he looked over his smartphone had been blown away. After securing the base, Tino plans to look for any humans and reinforce the area so it will at least be a comfortable place to sleep. Sitting with Ko, he justified his choice by saying he should at least add something to the floor because sitting there made his butt hurt. He wondered if anything soft and smooth would work. Suddenly, the floor changed, and you wondered whether it had been smoothed. She looked at him in surprise, and he wondered what they were thinking. Despite the change, the area felt more comfortable, and he could smooth the rock surface. Now the whole surface was well kept, and the wolves praised him as amazing. Coast said it was hard to believe. The hard rocks were now filled with magical power. That was what they expected of their lord. Since he had arrived first, he said he would take the lead. Suddenly, everyone started slipping on the surface. Tina was surprised and thought fine-tuning magic was difficult, while Ko managed to stay upright, thinking he would have made a fool of himself if he had fallen there. Lightning lit the night sky as fierce bolts struck the barrier created by the Tenno. Only the Spider Chief noticed, and the spider remembered the time he bore hellish flames and lived deep beneath the earth. There he dragged any prey unlucky enough to wander into the lava, and his kin feared him for it. For days his life felt fated by death because he was the Turnia, the Death Keeper. The spider had been huge before, but now he was much smaller, and he forced himself not to think about how small he'd become. He had apparently used all his magic protecting the children, and somehow they survived, perhaps by luck or because of his sacrifice. But it was unclear how such a potent miasma had disappeared. Ko called him by his true name. As the spider spoke, he wondered aloud whether Ko truly perceived him or only imagined it. His form had become so fragile that a gust of wind could send him flying. He brushed off Ko's concern, saying it was none of his business. Instead, he asked how things had ended up this way. The force was once again rich with magic, as it had been before. Next, he asked about the dark magical power. Ko hesitated to mention Tenno, saying he understood the spider's point, but that they had also been saved by Tenno's power. She dismissed it, insisting it was impossible, and that humans had contaminated the forest. Ko disagreed, explaining Tino's magic was of a completely different quality. That was why they revered him as their master. The spider wondered if Ko was proud of Fenmer's. Together they said they bore no ill will toward the spider's family. He warned that if the spider turned on its master, it would be disastrous. Scoffing, the spider insisted he would never do anything so terrible. No matter how they looked at it, 10 of them seemed to have several hundred times more magic than any of them at full power. The spider felt Tenno's magic sink in gently and swiftly restore the forest. Ko reassured him that without hostility, everything would be fine, because he did not want the number of kings in their forest to fall any further, and the spider asked why Ko assumed he would lose. Ko, calculating, put his jokes aside and asked him to tell his children to stop teasing Chai. The spider realized his children were not really teasing him. Ko said that since they left him and swarmed around Chai, Chai had become completely frightened. Then the spider asked who Chai was, and Ko replied that Chai had been named by their master and suggested the spider call him Ko. The spider confirmed that the name was his and remembered Tenno calling him chief the day before. Then he asked about last night's lightning strike, since it had released a terrifying surge of magical power. No one replied, and it was most likely humans again launching some kind of attack, but the Tenno barrier had stopped it. Surprised, the chief said it should be impossible, since Ko seemed to be claiming that Tenno were holding a barrier over the entire sky, which he reasoned would eventually exhaust their magic. He conceded that even in his former state, he could not have held such a barrier for a moment. Their master, however, seemed completely unfazed. Alone, Tenno sat deep in thought. For several days, he had seen no sign of humans. Preparing his house, he sent his clairvoyance drone to scout the area, but no matter how far it flew, there was only endless forest. Even after traveling a long way, he saw only animals and no houses or roads. Stretching to the horizon, the land was all wilderness. He started to think he had ended up in a world with no humans. Lying down, he told himself there was still hope. There were places he had not yet searched. Meanwhile, the remodeling of his home was going smoothly and changing the house's atmosphere. Since then, after many attempts, he managed to make the floors and walls feel smoother. Carving staircases from the rock, he opened passages to the upper and lower floors and became more skilled and quicker in his movements. From the outside, it looks like an ordinary mountain, but inside, a network of staircases leads up to the top floor, and to a spacious mansion with a two-story basement. Studying the rock's interior, he wished someone could appreciate his work, but only wolves surrounded him. Moving instantly, he thought about a recent trend. Some animals had begun competing to be the first to eat their prey's organs. Consider how groups like the Inuit ate raw food to maximize vitamin intake, and how bringing fresh meat into the diet wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Eating nothing but meat at every meal had grown tiresome, just as he'd expected, and fish would have been welcome, even a cursed one. The monotony of meat had grown unbearable. At that moment, he noticed something acting strangely. Concerned, he tried to figure out what was wrong. He soon realized the cursed creatures were back. They were attacking aggressively this time, and even they were getting hit, so he frowned, wondering what was happening. After last night's severe lightning strike, everything just kept getting more annoying. Reassuring them, he said not to worry and took a deep breath. At the top of the cave, he launched his clairvoyance drone to scan the area. He realized the entire forest was thinly shrouded by a lingering curse. He also remembered seeing a large lake beyond the barrier the day before. Purifying everything up to that point would let him expand and strengthen the barrier at the same time. Ko watched, curious about what he was going to do. Tino wondered if he could reach the lake from where he stood. Deciding to test it first, he let his magic flow outward, a habit he had grown used to while quarrying those rocks. In his mind, he stretched a single long, thin thread of magic toward the lake. The distance was farther than he'd expected, but he was confident he could handle it. Releasing an immense surge of power, Ko felt his magic grow so intense it was overwhelming and could become dangerous. 10-0 Ven instructed, now expand the stretched-out magic so it reaches and covers everything up to the lake, while making sure it closes all the way to the bottom of the earth. Using this method, he successfully extended the barrier and purified the land all the way to the lake. The barrier had expanded nearly tenfold, and oddly he felt his body growing lighter. Standing on the headland, he said it really felt limitless. They were no match for me. Coat nodded in agreement. Tino thought the curse in the water was mostly coming from outside, so he decided they could filter it using the barrier's membrane and carefully set up a 3-layer filtration system. Something or someone seemed to be casting the curse. Until the other side stopped its incursions, he resolved that from then on he would forcefully send back the accumulated curse every day. Placing a hand on Ko, he said, "Let's finish this by tomorrow." The scene moved to the well-protected kingdom. A man watched from outside and said it was another peaceful day. Mislost, commander of the 4th Chavoric Order of the Envelis Kingdom, stepped forward and called to the gamers. Gamers, commander of the 1st Chivalric Order, noted Mislost's early return. Misloz said nothing major had appeared this time. Gamers asked whether the forest had changed since then. Misloz denied that, but he was sure a monster would show up eventually. The king's powerful barrier still protected the kingdom, so they would be safe even if something went wrong. Gamer noted it should be fine, though he hesitated. Misloz remarked that this wasn't like Gamers showed. He was bothered by the strange light coming from the forest. The Gamers nodded and said that a few days earlier, a bright light had spread out in all directions from the center of the forest. A magic stone had given their king the power to suppress the forest kings. In all their years, they had never seen such a drastic change. The king of the forest was more than just a man. It was a myth, and it was remarkable that it still held such power. Miss Loss acknowledged this and said it was precisely why the 4th survey expedition was expanded, but reassured him that everything would be fine. The Gammers were reminded that Envelis had kept foreign invaders away for over 400 years, thanks to the strength of the king and the magicians. Their only task was to trust the king and fight. Glancing outside once more, he muttered that Wam's last words were true. They had to stay vigilant against the magical beasts growing stronger outside the barrier. The night had seen almost no fighting, and there was little of real significance to do. Ms. Lost headed home for a hot bath, Gamma. His father apologized for detaining him, then he turned his thoughts to the magic stone. A complex magical ice bell had been set up to control the forest, thought to be the center of the world. All of it relied on a single magic stone. The stone was said to have been found in an ancient ruin and to emit a strange magical power. Rumors said many magicians who tried to analyze the stone had spilled their blood for nothing. Members of the court who controlled the stone's power were the first to use it to halt their aging, and for hundreds of years they kept their positions as rulers. Players could tell the story wasn't fully true. Their slow aging seemed normal to him, so he did not question it, but the kingdom's stability rested on a single stone, and he could not stop wondering what that mysterious magic stone was. When Gammers stepped outside, he saw a group of elves approaching him. As they passed him, he admired the intricate patterns on their backs, and before he realized it, they had already made their way over there. A man trying to hurry them along shouted for them to move faster. Gamers noticed it was unusual to see so many slaves walking around, and the man recognized Gamers as the commander of the first Chevrolet quarter. Then asked if he had any business with the slave house. Gamers denied it and said he was simply passing by. Relieved, the man replied that even if Gamers wanted to acquire slaves, he couldn't deliver because supplies were running low. The Gamers were surprised, and the man quickly added that just the day before about 50 beasts had been taken as offerings for the magic stone. With their numbers dwindling, they had taken stock of what they were doing to address the issue. Gamer is still processing this, not yet, but said he must be on his way. As the man left, a figure in knight armor carrying a sword and another person came up, and the armored figure said it was rare to see the commander of the First Chivalric Order here. Gamer immediately recognized him as Gamble, commander of the 5th Chivalry Quarter. He thought Gamer was the top battle junkie, even among the 5th Order troops boosted by magic stones. Gamer was never good with people like him and tried to steer the conversation into less awkward territory. Gamer commented that his new sword seemed impressive. Gamel said the king had recently given him the sword. It matched the king's own blade, a magic weapon that grew stronger and sharper with every drop of blood it drank. Eager to try his new sword, Gamma planned to use it on the slaves and considered following the king's example by drinking plenty of their blood. Gamma advised moderation. As Gamel left, he told the man overseeing the slaves to find some who looked more appealing, and the man replied that they had been chosen specifically for breeding. Gamel scoffed and said he didn't care about that. He ordered the man to behead 2 slaves. He was satisfied that the sword was exceptionally sharp. Shocked, the man fell to the ground. Gamma muttered that it was getting boring because the slave's crest made them unresponsive. The priest with Gamel urged him to wait while the sword absorbed the energy and said a special technique was needed. Gamma impatiently told him to proceed with it. Meanwhile, gamers reflected on how the kingdom was sliding into madness. The scene shifted to Tenno, preparing a fish trap. Forced to use vines instead of thread, he said proudly he had managed to craft it. Swinging the trap to show Ko, he explained it was a way to catch fish. When Kuro reached for the small piece of meat, Tina said it didn't taste good. He walked toward the lake, hoping to find fish. Reaching the lake, he was dismayed to find it cursed. Disappointed, he muttered to himself, even though he'd held on to hope and come all the way out here to find this. He ran a check and confirmed his suspicion. The result was bad. Purifying the curse woven into the water proved difficult. Determined, Tenno created a barrier. He said he would temporarily leave the lake and river alone to focus on purifying the water. Finding a way to cleanse it weighed on him. He filtered the river through the barrier membrane. However, he needed a way to extend the cleansing across a wider area. Stumped, he could think of nothing and wondered how the curse had spread everywhere, as if it had been spun through a washing machine's centrifuge. Rubbing his hand through Ko's fur absent-mindedly, he noticed her hair had straightened. An idea struck him. Static electricity could gather dust, so perhaps it could gather the curse too. Curious, he decided to try it. Focusing, he moved his hand toward the lake and pictured a layer of static electricity on the water to absorb the curse. Surprisingly, it worked, but the lake's surface was now covered with countless small black spots, remnants of the curse, making it even more disgusting. Back at the castle, the priests gathered around a magic stone, and one of them asked if there was any news about the court marriage. The court mage said a day earlier it wasn't important. The stone had shown no signs of nearby stress, which caused concern, and the man said he had noticed nothing unusual. The court mage examined the stone, unsure whether it was only his imagination. After a moment, his gaze settled on a single spot on the stone. At the lake, Tenno had drew all the curse energy up into the sky. Proudly, he announced that he had finally collected it all. The walls stood in stunned silence. Tenno said that as promised yesterday, he would try to send the curse energy back, along with what he had collected inside the barrier. In an instant, he made it vanish, leaving the lake completely clean. Smiling in satisfaction, he said he would now just wait a while to see if the animals returned. Ko too beamed with joy. Tenot turned to the wolves and said it was time to go home and work on some interior design. Back at the castle, the mage summoned Tenno to inspect a scratch on the magic stone. When he did it, the stone began to glow brightly. Curious, the mage saw a small crack appear in the stone. In the main hall, the king sat with his ministers lined up beside him. One man finished the day's report, and the bald man next to the king asked for the next one. He noted that nothing important had been mentioned and sounded bored. The only report he wanted to hear was that the forest and the world were now in his hands. He wanted to know how the sacrifices for the magic stone barrier had gone the other day and whether the forest was about to collapse. Speaking with grim determination, he said he would squeeze the life out of the forest, dry it to dust, and make it the cornerstone of his world. Soon after, he completely destroyed the last filthy beastman territory. At that moment, a knight rushed in with an urgent report. Beside the king, the man asked aloud where the commotion was coming from. Trembling, the knight knelt before the king and nervously reported that the magic stone had a crack. The bald man asked whether the knight was certain and stressed that the room was not there. Have the same barrier that protects the country. The knight made it clear that it wasn't just that the barriers seemed strange. The room had flashed with light for a moment, and then a clear crack formed in the stone. Anger flared in the king, and he snapped, ordering the knight's execution. Gamers who had composed before gave a signal to hold back the knight. The whole room was silent, but everyone held the same thought. Everyone knew that criticizing the king's anger would lead to a slave's fate. Still seething, the king called to Miss Lost, ordering him to go to the forest at once and investigate the source of the disturbance. The scene shifts to the forest, where a giant cardboard box is about to fall on them as they run to escape. Eventually it stopped, and he realized he had been working on the house then. Afterward, he remembered entering the house to cook the meat and noticed cooking had become much easier thanks to the stove he'd set up, and even though he was just grilling, it was still a big improvement. On the first floor, the kitchen and dining room were big enough for everyone to gather and eat together. He said cooking, while enjoying the view of the surrounding greenery, felt peaceful. Drawn by the smell, Ho asked Tenno if he could try some grilled meat. Tenon understood and handed him a small piece, saying it was a real treat. Tasting it, he was delighted by the flavor. Seeing his reaction, others asked for a piece as well. Tenwa agreed and was about to give them some when he saw Chai standing at a distance. Calling out, he asked why he was standing apart and so quiet. Some members of the group, were also going to be offered meat. Chi was surprised and wondered whether it was really okay for him to have some. Karo reassured him that their master had wisely chosen to share and added that if Chi wanted more, he could join the next hunt, leaving Chi still surprised and unsure the offer was truly meant for him. He smiled and agreed to join them. They enjoyed the grilled meat, and Tenno suggested using 2 stoves next time to grill more efficiently. After his bath, he felt calm. He felt completely relaxed as he thought about how he had used magic to heat the water. Magic was truly the best, he said, and until recently he had relied on cleaning magic to deal with dirt, but as a Japanese person, he still couldn't go without a proper bath. Despite not getting soup this time, he managed to clean himself up but still longed for many things. After working hard to make everything work, he wanted to share the experience with everyone. Everyone seemed to be getting fluffier lately, and he wondered if they'd still fit. After that, he built a kind of toilet. He felt emotional because he had missed it so much. He remembered sneaking into the forest earlier to avoid the wolves, and how someone had caught up with him, saying it was dangerous to go alone. As they followed, Tenno reassured him that everything would be fine. He stopped dwelling on the past, noting those things would not happen again. Sitting in the bathroom, he said that after discovering he could make rocks with magic, he took care to be meticulous. It turned out just like the real thing. The washlet, complete with an automatic cleaning function, made him marvel at the wonders of magic. Hearing a noise, he went to check on Tenno and was surprised in the process. Ho stepped outside with a flushed face while the others wondered what had happened, then hesitated before mentioning the diet, admitting he had accidentally peeked at his master in a defenseless state and fearing Tenno might now hate him. Tenon, as usual, suggested installing a door and said he was quite pleased with the toilet he had built. He had made one on every floor, aisle. While practicing his magic, he accidentally created silver ore that was difficult to handle with magic. Surprised to see it stretch, he wondered how far it could extend. The chief watched in disbelief and said it was hard to accept that Tino was channeling magic through mithril. Tenno kept stretching it and soon saw light pass through, showing it was more like a kind of glass. Sitting down, he thought it still looked fine after he'd thinned it, and decided to try inserting the material into some rock windows. In the end, he opened wide windows on every floor. Since he had plenty of materials on hand, he thought he might want some wood flooring too. In the forest, he found a giant tree, noting it was the straightest one around and that it looked both nice and tall. He remembered a TV scene showing that getting wood was essential for processing, but in reality, it took several years. He decided to use magic to cut the branches off first and then peel away the bark. After confirming the wood was good quality, Tenno began turning it into planks. Using wind magic, he finished quickly but forgot to cut the base, and now the planks were about to fall on them. Back in the present, he decided that next time he'd make sure to cut the base after felling the tree. He now had to move the planks to the front of the base. Instantly, he teleported to the bedroom on the fourth floor. Once the others were informed, he began installing the floor. At first, she assumed laying a floor was just putting down a few planks and would be easy. While working, he quickly noticed the regaps and the board thickness were inconsistent. Still, the planks were too heavy and too large, even though instantaneous movement let him make precise adjustments. His ideal floating plank technique turned into a mess, and after thinking it over, he realized that depending on solid flooring could cause problems later. He sat down and sighed, knowing there was still so much work to do. Deciding to change his approach, he wanted a proper tool with a clean edge to slowly shave down the planks, but the stone in his hand was too rough, so he set out to craft a tool from the silver ore. He stretched the metal until it was thin, then shaped it into what looked like a proper blade. After sharpening it, he tested the edge and found it very effective. Ko, who had watched the whole process, looked clearly impressed. Tino added that although the rock mountain was far from soft, he would need to be very careful handling the blade. When magic flowed through the Rocky Mountains, they became unexpectedly flexible, and he found it interesting. He started thinking he could make a pot and wanted more than meat, a different kind of food. Lost in thought, he drifted to door hinges and began making a doll. He said the windows would open, and he might as well add hinges to the fourth floor entrance. The doll he made was quite cute. He made a few more, saying it had been a long time since he played with clay, and it felt fun. The rocks he used seemed to glow, and he wondered if he could make only their eyes light up. After finishing his creations, he fell asleep without noticing, and the next morning he woke and decided to co-sleep a little longer. Rising, he noticed the woods had been neatly arranged. With the foundations in place, he was surprised when the Dalti began removing themselves. They worked together to lay out the wood and build the floor. Tenno and as the wolves washed, they turned to look at him. Puzzled, he found 9 dolls, all made from the stone walls he had crafted the night before. He couldn't figure out how they had come to life until a childhood fairy tale came back to him about elves who secretly made shoes at night. Tenno even wished the floor had been finished while he slept and wondered if that was why it had been done. He noticed one of the dolls still there and thought it might not be moving because he hadn't formed a clear image in his mind when he made it. Then ask everyone to stop working and gather in front of him. Without warning, they stopped working and gathered at his command, much to his surprise. Then he addressed the last one as a helper robot and simply told it to move. Then the last doll moved, and Tenno felt great joy on seeing it. Tenno said he was leaving the task to all of them, and, watching them resume work, he marveled at how quickly and neatly they moved, since by 5 they had already finished while staying organized and clean, and they looked quite cute. The wolves froze at the dolls and began calling them golems. They were visibly upset, and one of them asked Ko whether these were the same kinds of weapons humans used to attack the forest. Ko urged them all to calm down. Tennom knew the wolves were frightened of the stone dolls at first, but he hoped they would soon get used to them and start getting along. Tenno told the dolls to install matching flooring on the second and third floors and gave them some free time, so he resumed exploring the forest. He left with the wolves, who promised to bring back plenty of meat. However, South chose a different plan and went to find vegetables and seasonings. They kept moving forward, and Tenon noticed the earlier haze lingered the farther he went, so he continued purifying the area as he walked. He walked on, the curse seeming to come from where the light drifted, yet he kept sending it back and wondered what would happen to the person on the other side, since they would reap what they sowed. The forest looked a lot brighter than when he first arrived, and he asked Ko if it had originally been like that. 10 unnoticed fruits hung from a tree. He had never seen anything like it before. Thinking it might be edible, he paused, unsure he could even climb the tree. Despite the fruit was right in front of him, but he couldn't reach it. Just then, Chief jumped up, hopped onto the tree, and began to climb. Ten of Smile felt pleased to see he could do it, and then noticed the other 8 wolves climbing the tree too. On closer inspection, he saw they had no wings and wondered whether they were the hang fighters. He thought he'd only met them a week ago, and because they were growing so fast he hoped it was just his imagination. Ko and the others were getting a lot bigger too, and he was now about 185 centimeters tall. Soon he saw the spiders carrying something and wondered how they had managed to get it. Holding the fruit, he wondered if he could eat it because its bright red color looked appetizing. Signs showed animals had already eaten the fallen fruit. He cut the fruit with a sharp object he had in his. He held it in his hand and took a bite, only to discover that it was incredibly delicious. He shed a tear, saying that after so long, tasting something sweet felt completely different. The fruit was crisp, peachy, ripe, and delicious. He gave some to the spiders and to Ko, then they collected all the fruits. He said he had accidentally taken more than he meant to and did not know what to do with them. Even after squeezing the men in, the bag still held only one, and he wished it worked like a certain robot's pocket. He kept stuffing fruit into the bag, amazed it could hold so many. The magic was outrageous. On his way back, he picked up more food. All the wolves went hunting and finally brought back a wild boar. Tenno said he was back and asked Hayo if anyone had been hurt, saying he had brought back a large haul, and Hayo told him to look at Soha, who had caught the most. Tenno told them to clean everything first and then. He then spread out all the fruits and vegetables and said he had brought too many without salt. With these, their diet would definitely improve. Preparing to pray, he said he would cut it to drain the blood and then use wind to skin it. After that, he cut the meat to get it ready to eat. The walls looked ready to dig in. Tenno mentioned that the insides were sticking out a little, so he apologized to them and asked them to eat it all. While the others ate, Ko set aside some meat for himself and for storage. Shine said Tenem's meat was clean, easy to eat, and the best. Karu noted there was a lot of liver that day. Tino said the front of the house was getting cramped, and if he had some salt, he would cure ham and other things. He also wished he knew how to tan the skin. He was using the refrigerated storeroom on the first basement level. The vegetable storage needed tables to chill the produce, which wouldn't work for now, so he would figure out a solution later. Drawn to the meat, Karen moved toward it as it cooked. Tenno approached, said it was well cooked, and thanked Karen, saying he preferred cooked meat. He described a slightly sweet vegetable, like a cross between cabbage and lettuce, raw but with tender inner leaves. He mentioned a sour fruit with a refreshing scent, even though it was vividly green, and he explained how it was. Squeeze it over the grilled meat. He prepared the. He took a bite and said it was pleasantly hot, with a gentle sweetness that spread through their mouths. The acidity added another layer of flavor. It tasted delicious, even though it was just ordinary meat, and he wished he had some sauce to go with it. The sight made it clear that, except for Karen, everyone had gathered around, and he had no idea what had happened to the chief. The flooring on the upper floors was finished in 3 days, and he was pleased that the dolls had done all the heavy lifting, even in the kitchen. Because it was important, he decided to make it even better and asked them to build a frame measuring 200 x 160 x 60. Doubting they could manage it, he went to the chief, thinking that with the food and house settled, there was only one thing left to do. Noticing Chief getting bigger, he said it was, as expected, a bit scary. Chief spoke in his own language, asking Tenno to look at his body, and saying that because Manitno had poured a large sum into him, he had recovered so much. He said his children could not hold back their gratitude. Tenno also needed a lot of mana for the barrier and the golems. The chief kept supplying mana to them and the forest. Sometimes Tenno worried about him. Moving closer, Tenno tried to tell whether Chief was trying to convey something and sensed that Chief was intelligent and at least friendly. Tenono then told the chief he had something to ask. The clothes he always wore were beginning to fray, even though he'd been using a cleaning spell on them every day. As spiders, they had to be good at trading, he thought, though he'd never seen Chief do anything like that. Tenno really wanted some new clothes. Then he brought up the trade, asking if the chief knew of any plants they could harvest that would last longer. Since Chief did not respond, and Tenno wondered if he even understood. He then set out with Chief, Chi, and Kuro. He explained he had only brought Chi and Kuro because Ko wasn't around. He told both of them he was counting on them. They both growled, and Kuro said in their language that being entrusted with the task was unexpected. Chi agreed, saying Tenno did not really need them. It was a good chance to show Ko, who was always worried about Chase's strengths. He told Tenno he would do his best to meet his master's expectations. Tenno called to the chief to ask if it was there. Then they saw the gigantic caterpillars, and the wolves were shocked. As the chief stood there, Tenet wondered if something had happened to him. Leaving the caterpillar, he said it might be able to grant his wish. Karu and Chi stayed skeptical, warning that those were Suesova, magic beasts that carried deadly poison, but the chief assured them that if they did not provoke the caterpillars, they would be fine, and he could handle it. At that moment, the caterpillar reached for Tino's hand, shocking the chief and the others. Chief wondered what the caterpillar was up to. Startled, Tenno said it had really frightened him, though for a moment he felt drawn to the caterpillar. It looked different from what he had imagined, but it seemed sturdy and usable. He handed it to the chief, who said that for a moment he thought he might burn to death inside Tenno's barrier. Kuru and Chi looked confused and said there was no help available. Tenno then asked Chief how many of those larvae they could bring with them. They put one on Kuru and one on Chai, and on the way back the chief told them the caterpillars would not spit poison and asked them to explain it clearly so they could rely on him, and Tenno apologized to the wolves for that. They met Ko, and Ko was surprised to see Kai collecting the bugs again. Tenno hugged Ko warmly to welcome him while Chi, just about to speak, was cut off by Ko saying he was just kidding, and Chi, as always, had an adorable reaction. Entering the house, Tenno realized while repairing the toilet and refrigerator that some magic could be embedded in the rocks to make their effects last, and he had devised a new plan. Use an automatic cleaning strategy to keep the floor clean. He planned to convert the unused second floor into rearing rooms and install a ventilation window. Placing some needed leaves in the food, he set the caterpillars on them and said he now needed someone to take care of them because he couldn't do it alone. Making the stone dolls, he told them they would look after the caterpillars. The caterpillars grew frightened. Tenno was surprised because the dolls were so cute. Still, the caterpillars were afraid of them. After that, the thread work seemed to be going well. Tenno started thinking about the best way to make cloth. He took off his t-shirt and handed it to the dolls for inspection. They began talking, and Tenno wondered whether they had found a solution. It looked like they weren't going to make a bed right away. One of the dolls led him to the bed, and he said he was thrilled, calling it even better than he'd imagined. He said it was amazing they had made it in just half a day. Now closer to a civilized lifestyle, he looked forward to the night. That night, everyone slept by the bed, and Tenno lay on it, realizing he was starting to understand its value. Astonished by the stone doll's work, he could hardly believe the rock wall from the day before had been completely transformed and now featured the stylish furniture he'd seen online. They served him the food, and everything was ready, including chopsticks and water. Starting to eat, he noticed how thoughtful everything felt and that the food and water were twice as good as usual. He noticed only 8 dolls were here, and the other 2 were in the caterpillar room. Wearing a new light green t-shirt with black pants, he noticed the smooth fabric felt exactly like silk. Half joking, he said not to tell anyone that depending on what they ate, the color of their clothes changed. At last he was relieved to have plenty of spear-shaped undergarments too. It was a little embarrassing when he inspected them. Spotting a sewing machine he remembered seeing on TV long ago, he wondered whether they had all made it themselves. It was truly impressive. He decided it was time for a change of pace. He headed into the forest with Ko, Shine, and Hale, confident the search would be fruitful that day. He was already craving some seasoning. Tenno had only 1 rock left and hoped for more rock salt or something nearby, doubting the world even had any oceans. They pressed on and found another cave, 10. He said that even though he had never been in this area before, it was better that a large rolling was near their home. He felt a gentle decline inside and grew uneasy, sensing a curse or something like it. Lighting a small fire, he told the wolves to keep watch. "Let's move inside," he said. They moved deeper into the cave to find the wild path that led further down. Moving, they heard sounds coming from inside. Moving forward, they reached a large open area and came face to face with a colony of mass advance. Shocked, Tina immediately charged forward, eager to fight. Hannah knew she couldn't just stand by and watch. He asked for a ride. He activated his purification ability, but it did nothing. He tried using a barrier, but the ants kept advancing toward him. Hose stepped in quickly, blocked the ants, and threw them away. Tenno pushed himself to his feet while the ants kept closing in. Dark patterns on the ants' bodies gave him an ominous feeling and left him uneasy. Still inside the barrier, they were surrounded by ants that seemed to be trying to break through. The barrier held, but Tenno didn't know what to do next. The purification technique failed, leaving him unsure what to do next. He thought about the black markings on the ants' bodies, and he remembered meeting the wolves for the first time when a similar black haze surrounded them. A curse may have completely taken over their bodies. If so, an exorcism might help. Ants kept attacking from above, but the barrier still shielded him. Tendon murmured that it wasn't working as he struggled to form a clear image in his mind. It crossed his mind that 2 different beings might share the same body, as if one were possessed. He pictured a state where the ants' true selves were trapped and could not escape. Understanding what was happening, he declared he would break the curse binding their spirits. Determined, he used his power to release the binding and free all the ends. This scene reminded him of a dark chapter in his past, when the forest was consumed by dark magic, the rivers vanished, and the fruit turned poisonous. When the forest's curse was lifted, the king who had once ruled and protected it vanished, and no one could reach the human world. Shocked by the sudden appearance of the new monsters, Ten of Saw watched as the forest was engulfed by darkness once again. Dark magic coiled around his body, dimming the ant's vision. Over time, he feared he would become nothing but another creature harming the forest. He would not allow that. A king of the forest, he refused to let such a fate befall him. He summoned the forest's water dragon, who once ruled all the worlds, to ask for its help. Back in the present, Tenno put his hand on an ant's head and reassured it that everything would be fine. The surface was smooth and cold to the touch. Suddenly the ant moved, and Tina wondered what was happening. Ko called out to the ant, asked if he was An Faromi, and said his presence felt so different that Ko didn't even recognize him. However, the An recognized Ko as the King Fenmer. The ants freed them, and 10 of those freed thanked the ants before following along. Remembering Cohen saying everything was fine, he realized they had already been following the ants for 30 minutes. Unsure if it was truly all right, he still felt the ant leader was like their chief and did not seem bad. At last, they reached a place. Tenno scanned the area with his light magic. They discovered the dark curse lingering there. Ko asked, this might really be the water dragon's dwelling. The ants answered yes, and explained that Burwa had once been a beautiful sacred lake overflowing with rich magic, and Tina realized, as he feared, that it was already too late for the lake. Driven by determination, Tanom activated his curse absorption and purification abilities. I think there may be other creatures around the Rocky Mountains that have been taken over, and we are suffering like the ant. He felt the curse spreading through the whole forest, and, vowing to send the broken curse back with twice the force, he released the bind across the entire forest. That move shocked the company. After Tenno finished the purification, they reached the lake. The view was breathtaking. The ant felt the purifying power working, healing and restoring its strength. Then he stretched his body, feeling the strain and reflecting. What began as a search for seasoning unexpectedly became this. He suggested they continue the hunt. An ant followed him, and Tenor was surprised by what it did. Moving on, he noticed a fruit within reach that felt strange but familiar. Curious, you picked it to see if it was edible. He sniffed it but couldn't smell anything. As he bit into it, an intense saltiness hit him. This was the very flavor he'd been dreaming of, so he told Ko they should take as much as they could and head home quickly. Meanwhile, Ms. Lost and a team of knights searched the forest. They felt unwell and moved slowly, and some even fainted from the strain. 2 weeks earlier in the castle, Miss Lost sat with gamers and asked for a break. Just back from the forest yesterday, he had to do another survey and wondered if the king expected him to work himself to death. Gamer told him to leave it and said he would pretend he hadn't heard. Miss Lost noted how those people made a big fuss when the Varda magic stone cracked, but a thorough inspection showed it was not serious. Normally, the monster's magic stones were barely the size of a fingertip, while the castle's magic stone was enormous. The small scratch was nothing to worry about, the gamers agreed, and the records showed the magic stone was full of cracks when it was first found, so Miss Lu's degree called it a foolish thing to worry about. This time was different from the other surveys, he noted, and if there really was a problem, they would have to solve it as best they could. From the beginning, the 4th Chavuric Order had been a unit with vast experience in the forest. Founded to capture and subdue monsters, it also took on the duty of serving the forest. Miss Lo thought he'd been to the forest countless times, and honestly nothing ever happened. It was just a useful, dark, gloomy place. He said if the survey was normal, there was nothing wrong. Gamers asked if that was true, and if something was happening in the center of the forest. Miss Law sighed and said gamers could not seriously mean the kings of the forest were there. The gamer didn't know what to say and was too afraid to respond. Miss Lost asked what he was afraid of, and reassured him that reaching the forest's energy was difficult with monsters overflowing because of the evil eye. Even if something emerged, it would not mean the world's strongest kingdom would ever lose. Yes, it would. As Miss Lost prepared to leave, the country slaves assigned to scouting and chores passed a bottle around, and he agreed, saying he would leave it to the boy and that they would depart once the knights were ready. Only a few were going because it normally took 10 days to reach the forest, and the boy agreed to leave too. Ms. Loss wondered why Gammer looked so concerned. Then a man asked if something had happened to the First Order command. Mislo said it wasn't like that. A longtime friend of Gamer's, he thought gamers tended to overthink because he was so smart. Among the Shavoric Order's gamers, he was the only one who rarely used slaves. Miss Lost said it seemed gamers treated slaves like people. From birth, the endless slaves were bound by the powerful slave crest. This left them unable to feel emotions or even think for themselves. They could not speak unless given an order. Nanga had it far worse, but even though it would be easier to stop thinking about them, his loss made him see them as nothing but slaves. The man agreed and said he felt the same. He found the treatment of the fifth commander somewhat cruel. Miss Lost said sacrificing so many people to the magic stone was unacceptable, no matter how they approached it. He stopped himself and suggested they forget about it. The man said he did not dislike that part of his loss. Miss Lost wondered if the man was mocking him. Gamers wrote a letter, thinking about what Miss Lost had said earlier. Many gamers doubted Miss Lost could find anything unless she went to the center of the forest. Although the Fourth Chivalric Order claimed to know the forest, they had covered at most 10% of it. Half the world was forest, and no one had ever reached its center. Several hundred years had passed since the spell was cast, and even now there were reports of retaliation by the forest kings. Beyond the forest's strong barrier, people said no power could affect the magic stone. Since the stone was discovered, those countless sacrifices should have strengthened it. Gamers then wondered if a being more powerful than the forest kings had appeared there. Half a month later, Miss Lost and his party were fighting a monster. They finally drove their swords into it, killing it. Pleased with their victory, the knights were told by Mislos to let it rest. The man beside him also said something felt off. Mislo pointed out that it had been half a month since they entered the forest, yet the number of monsters was unusually low, and the man nodded, saying this was only 4 encounters so far, whereas normally they would have run into at least 10 by now. Miss Lust also noted that every creature they'd encountered so far was one of the kingdom's enhanced magic beasts, designed to attack only the forest's natural inhabitants. He wished he had brought a Jishin with them, because they could not assess the situation properly on their own. A sudden unease washed over him, and as he listened, he heard rustling in the trees and felt a dark, ominous presence. Uncertain about what was happening in the forest, he was reassured that they were still on the usual path and that it should be the same forest as always. Miss Lost couldn't shake the feeling that the air was oddly clean and more uncomfortable than before. Fear slowly seeped into his body. The others were sensing something strange too. Miss Lost wondered if they were reaching their limits and suggested they take a salt brick. He called to the reconnaissance unit, or he ordered them to move ahead, watch for dangerous creatures, and return within an hour. Leaving, Miss Lowe thought they still had a long way to go. If it was safe, they would briefly set up camp at their current location. He ordered 5 people from the slave unit to take turns standing guard for 6 hours each while the rest prepared the campsite. The others hesitated to make camp there, and Ms. Lost asked if they had anything to say. They denied it. As they carried out their tasks, Miss Luz thought to himself that if he couldn't bring the squad to their senses, they might do something rash. The slaves did not feel fear, and Ms. Lost wondered if that was normal since they were born without emotions. A man told him there were no threats in the area, and because the slaves had sharp senses and keen noses and ears, they should be fine for now. Before Miss Lost could respond, a flash of light appeared in the sky. Everyone froze in shock, and Ms. Lost thought a streak of light had passed by. There was no assault, and no one had fallen out. After allowing the screen mech code, they saw the ground glowing, leaving the guards shocked. He regained control of himself and prepared for an ambush. After all that had happened, they were all lying unconscious. They tried to work out what had happened, and Miss Law suggested they might have been attacked by the Forest King. Everyone who collapsed had simply fainted, and no one seemed injured. A man came up and told him all the slaves were gone. Stunned by his loss, he feared they had all been destroyed. The man denied it, saying they appeared to have run off on their own. Ms. Loss was taken aback by this and wondered if the crest had been broken. He knew he would have to tell the king about this. Tino walked with the creature and said that since it would be joining them, it needed a name. Seeing its scarlet body, he named it Shuri. Shuri grew emotional when it was named. Once they got home, Kuru said their master was late. They did not like staying at home with the dolls. Koast said what had happened. Karu said he had been returning from a hunting trip, carrying the prey back to their master's room as usual, when the dolls saw him and sprang at him with the angriest looks he had ever seen. Suddenly a Sharid appeared, and Kuru was shocked, saying Hell's Garden in disbelief. The chief arrived and asked why Shuri was with their master. Sherry said they should be asking why they were there. It was clear the two had a deep rivalry. Tenno, noticing the tension, asked them not to fight since they were clearly at odds. Shuri reluctantly agreed to cooperate, and the chief said they would never see eye to eye, but if Tenno could prove Shuri's worth, neither of them would have to lose their home. Ko thought it was impressive that Tenno, using his power, had managed to bring together two races that could not normally coexist. The Phoenix situation reminded him of how things had been for them. Entering the room, he noticed that even the ceiling was finished. They called to him and he realized they had already used up all the planks of squared timber. He remembered an important task he needed to do the next day. After collecting the fruits, he reflected on how much had happened. Now it was time to make the salt he had always wanted. Unsure it would work, he used about 5 fruits and left the rest in storage. Earlier he'd tried casting on stored vegetables, attempting a vague time suspension spell. Now, looking at the fruits, he thought it had turned out quite well. First, a fine cloth was placed over the silver or bowl. Using all their strength, they squeeze out the juice. He reminded them to boil it down slowly to prevent burning. A little liquid remained, so he strained it again. 2 hours of hard work later, he finally produced some salt. He rushed off, saying something so special deserved its own container, then filled a few containers and said he had ended up turning all the fruits into salt. The idea of turning those tough golden ores into stunning containers excited them. Freely manipulating gold that had been dense with magic, not just the silver one, was something even he could not have done in the past. Having worked hard for half the day, he spent the night enjoying some tasty meat. While cooking, he sprinkled some salt and fragrant herbs on the thawed steaks and let them rest for a minute. They co-watched him, and 10 people apologized, saying the salt was something he would not share with them. He kept grilling the meat over the fire, wishing he had a frying pan or a Dutch oven and some oil. Lard could be made from pig fat, and though he'd only seen it on TV, he was improvising. Once grilled, he rolled the steaks in thick leaves and let them rest for a few minutes. To finish, he browned the outside once more. Just as it was ready and he was about to take a bite, 2 wolves moved toward the meat. Now enjoying the flavor, he pulled the food away and told the wolves their portions were already prepared outside, reminding them it was salted so they could not eat it. He still gave them a small amount and assured them he wasn't trying to feed everyone something strange, and when he looked around, he also gave some to Karen. Realizing Karen was gone, he watched her fly into the sky. All through the next day he waited, but she never returned. She was an odd bird, but should be fine. He couldn't stop worrying because she was small and vulnerable and might be attacked by a dangerous beast. Ko spoke in his own language, telling Ten not to worry about Karen. It was unnecessary. As someone who had been closest to him, Karen should have gained a large amount of magic by now. Actually, wasn't Karen regaining more power than Ko? Ten and a Hug Ko were crying and wondered if the company was also worried about him. He asked them to stay, hugged Ko, and decided that since he had calmed down a bit, he should find something to distract himself with. A while back he tried tanning, but it was difficult. At first he thought using magic would be a good way to remove the flesh and fat, but it backfired when he tried. His poor fine-tuning of the process led him to cut a large hole with the knife. After struggling to remove the flesh, every time he tried to wash the dirt off, the water turned pitch black and the belt hardened and began to smell. At last they reached their biggest hurdle, drawing. This was always where things went wrong. Whatever he tried, the leather hardened and nothing restored its softness. That was expected because he didn't know enough about tanning and couldn't figure out what was causing it. Then he gave Coast some food, saying it was the last rinse. With the fur he could make a bed or a rug, and with the leather too he could make shoes or accessories, so his ambitions began to grow. A wolf wondered what Tenno had been up to lately. Another replied that it didn't seem related to eating. When the wolves returned with the prey, Tenno greeted them and told them to wait a moment. Everyone was eating a lot more than before, and there was much to do. The chief brought his prey too, showing he had been out hunting. Tenno realized that since Shuri arrived, the chief had grown competitive, and he wondered how large this world's animals could grow. Even the coast's size matched that of a small car. Tenno suggested that since they had already made the salt, they should try making ham as well. After a while, he realized he'd accidentally left the first soak on since the day before. By the time he checked the water, it was a muddy brown. He pulled the fur out and wondered whether it would still be okay to air dry it. After a while, he noticed the fur was getting softer than usual. After thinking it over, he figured it was because he left it in that special pot he rarely used. Deciding to gather the same kind of tree and extract it by boiling, it wasn't certain that would work. He named the dolls Shiki. He remarked that it was a cute name while Shuri moved around, aware that the master had made all the dolls. Tina reminded him that so far he had been calling the smaller ones One Eye and Three Eye, and he asked One Eye to bring up 3 pieces of furred frozen earlier. He explained he would lead them through the tending process. The dolls moved quickly, and Tina was impressed. They were even experimenting with different concentrations, he said. Stretch the fur so it won't shrink as much when drying. Although he had created them, they seemed far more skilled than he was. 10 of them asked whether they wanted to try more tasks, but there seemed to be no space left in front of the house. He had always left the wood collection to one eye and wondered if he should start clearing more space. Looking at the huge fallen log, he said it looked a few hundred years old, and realizing all those logs came from one massive tree made him feel a little guilty. Ko showed him a tree and asked in his own language if they should cut it. Ten wondered if it was all right since they were still cutting down trees. He would need to process the cut ends of the wood and then move it to the third floor and the first basement. Seeing the dolls take the cut logs away, he realized they were still making something. After cutting down many trees, he felt he had done more than enough for the day. Returning to the house, he decided to stop for the day. At that moment, a doll pointed out a comfortable chair to him. To his surprise, it was a hanging chair, something he'd wanted in high school. The details were so accurate it felt unsettling. He saw they had built a wooden bathroom, and even the stairs had a handrail and wooden steps with small anti-slip attachments. The toilet door was still missing. He kept thinking that when Karen returned, the changes would shock her. Karen sat by the lake Tenem had already cleaned. The next day, Tina realized he had to decide what to do with the stump field, and to his surprise, all the stones were gone. He watched the ants carry the remaining pieces of the useless logs to their den. Approaching the den, he nodded as he inspected their work, satisfied that it was exactly what he expected. Shari stepped out of the den to greet him and said it was now much more comfortable than Ida Hassan's den. Tino realized Shuri was inviting him in, but he politely declined and apologized for being unable to enter. Looking around, he noticed the ants burrowing into the ground. They removed the stumps and plowed the field with impressive efficiency. Inspired, Tenev realized he could create a proper field here, saving him the trouble of constantly searching for vegetables. The plot was small, just enough to support him, and he thought it would be manageable. He wondered if potatoes would grow well in that soil. He asked Churi whether any vegetables could grow well there. It grew underground and was edible. After Shuri left, Tenno told Shiki that if they were going to cultivate the field, they would need to make their own organic fertilizer, and that his father used to take him out to the fields, so he knew how to make it. He asked Shiki to help prepare the farm, explaining he would set aside a corner of the field under a tree's shade, dig a hole, and erect a wooden frame. He planned to alternate burying food scraps with dead leaves and dead grass. Next, he sprinkled a little water to speed up the fermentation process. Once he had spread it, all that remained was to wait. He thought it over and opened a container of compost. A swarm of bugs immediately emerged and surprised him. Unsure how to handle it, he tried to speed up the process, hoping to turn the place into a magical storage for vegetables. He ensured water vapor rose from the soil, releasing an aromatic scent. He dug up the soil again, mixed it, and even improved the mixture. Meanwhile, the wolves chased a wild boar and together managed to bite and kill it. He said it had been a long time since he'd enjoyed a hunt that good. At that moment, Tenno spotted something flying in the sky and wondered what it was. He told Shiki the current setup was good enough for now, and since the temperature was warm, they could leave it as it was for the time being. A giant bird appeared before him without warning. He wondered if it was Karen. As she drew closer, Tenno told it to wait. Karen suddenly began to cry, and a surprised Tino quickly explained that it wasn't what she thought. At the same time, he felt happy to see Karen was safe and even more beautiful. Coming to investigate, Cole recognized Karen. Karen asked for help with the beast in its own language, saying its powers weren't enough to deal with it. Tenno spotted a winged, fluffy creature and sensed a curse on it. He cast a purification spell on the beast. As the curse lifted, they asked together whether the water was dry. Karen said the force would be revitalized now. Ko reminded them that the dragons, a divine beast race among the kings, presided over the 5 elements of the forest. For many years they defended the forest against human intrusion, then suddenly they vanished without a trace. If the water dragon was still alive, the forest water would have stayed pure. Karen agreed, sharing that belief. When the dragon's power returns, it will revive the forest. Karen told Ko that he planned to search for the other dragons and bring them back to Tenno's side. Given Karen's mobility, Ko suggested it might be best for her to handle the search while Ko would take responsibility for Tenno's safety. Karen said he did not believe their master needed Ko's protection. Tino stared at the water dragon and admired its beautiful blue shoe that resembled a fluffy, furry ball. As the world often was, he wondered whether it was truly alive. He asked why it felt that way. Karen had no answer, but when she spoke his language, she confirmed the presence inside was unmistakably that of a water dragon. He stroked the creature 10 times, noticing how soft and fluffy it was. They decided to name it Fluffy. Ko was surprised their master had named the water dragon, and Karen said it was a good name. Tenno could tell that Fluffy liked its name. Just then I heard noises and realized Shan and the others were back. He noticed Cheyenne carrying a much larger prey, about Cheyenne's size. It was astonishing. Cheyenne proudly announced they had caught a large animal. Tenon noticed Cheyenne's tail wagging rapidly and said he seemed more pleased than usual, looking especially happy right now. Lately, Tenna had run into several creatures, first a brood of fast spiders, then a bird, and now this mysterious creature. He figured the wolves were happy too, since this was another world. Recently his skills kept improving, and he appreciated the wolves' work. With Karen back, they decided to have a feast. Tenno began cutting the meat, and realized he was getting used to removing the heart as well, even though he did not want to eat it. While cutting, he found a stone beside the prey's heart, and wondered if it was a sign of illness or just a lump. On closer inspection, he found several more of the stones, but not all the prey had them, so he considered whether they had always been inside or if something else was responsible. Trying to purify the stones, he saw no change. Deciding they weren't cursed, he ignored the dolls and turned to the objects they had made. 10 of them told Ko he wanted to try making something that day. First, they get ready to silver or to place on a tray. They gathered all the stones, rolled them into place, arranged them on the platform, and completed the setup. Mountain stones were easy to shape, stored the effects of the last spell cast on them, and resisted heat. That gave Tenor an idea. He decided to use the stones for a barbecue. Thinking about how coal works, he heated the stones he had placed in the container the doll had crafted. Balls, then he took long sticks and threaded vegetables and meat onto them for cooking, saying he would need to skewer the ingredients with a gold skewer. Used to grilling on a stovetop, he now realized the grill's shape also mattered. He looked at Karen and told her to wait, assuring her the food would be ready soon. Lately, even the chief had begun eating cooked meat, while Cole and the others kept eating it raw. At that moment they approached, drawn by the smell of the meat. Tina thought he might have finished what was inside, so she decided to give him some. He wondered if Fluffy could also eat meat. Seeing Fluffy eat it without hesitation, he thought about adding some salt and lemon juice to his own portion. He took a bite, found it absolutely delicious, and decided to make more cooking utensils. A good sauce to go with the meat also seemed like a great idea. Starting to think of ways to create them, he realized the stones didn't seem strange at all. He tried imbuing the stones with magic, and to his surprise, it flowed through them instantly. So far, the most practical material for conducting magic has been the stones from the stone mountain, but once their stored magic ran out, they stopped working. He was also worried that the toilet was not properly clearing waste. Examining the stone, he wondered whether it could also be used for that purpose. He had to test it. The more magical power he put into the stone, the more energy it could store. Tenon saw the stone's color had changed. Now a vibrant green like a gem. If the same happened with the other stones, each one changed to a different color. Color change depended on the monster type, and the moment it stopped changing varied with how much magic was poured in. The stones were beautiful, but Tennant wasn't sure how to use them yet, and he considered selling them for a lot of money, though if he regretted it, there was no one around to buy them. He noticed Ko looking at the stones, and Tina wondered what was wrong. Take a deep breath and let out a fiery, shocking tenor. He wondered if it was magic. Tenno had believed Ko could use magic, but he did not expect such a sudden display. Ko grabbed a red stone, shrouded himself in flames, and unleashed a blast. Tino stood stunned and confused. When Cole reached for another stone, Tina realized what was happening. Tina did not yet fully understand what Cole was trying to show, but Cole seemed ready to keep demonstrating until Tina grasped it. Tenno began to suspect the stones could amplify magical attacks. To test it, he used water in a glass, focused on it, and watched the water level change. Some were drawn out, while others were drained into the surrounding water. At that moment, Shuri arrived and Tenno welcomed him. Taking in the scene, he realized, almost without noticing, that he had acquired a handy item. Only later would he discover its true use. Shir offered something to eat and told Tenno to enjoy it too. Ten wanted to whether they could eat it all. Ants watched him while Shuri said those things could even be eaten raw, and Tenno tried them with the meat and found them very tasty. He handed some to Tenno and encouraged him to try it. Tenno agreed and suggested they leave it in the sun for now, since he planned to till the field first. When Shari asked where he was going, the chief arrived and said those things were not to their master's liking. Tenno went to the field and asked the dolls when they would finish telling. With the ants' help, digging in became much easier for them. He needed to mix the compost he'd made into the soil and keep tilling the land with it. Never having made compost before, he was unsure it would work, but he decided to give it a try. Taking the axe, he began cutting into the ground, thinking that if the soil was good, he'd soon reach the ridge. He kept working and after a while said the area should be enough. Usually, people cut potatoes in half before planting them. He then noticed something unfamiliar, felt it might be cursed and unsafe to eat, and Shuri said it was a great find and suggested Tenno soak it in water to help soil build up. When he finished tilling the field, he felt strange. What he had planned as a small vegetable garden was turning into an entire farm. After planting 100 potatoes, he still saw more than half the field empty and wondered if he had made a mistake. Shuri looked sad, wondering why Tenno had buried the potatoes after they had gone to the trouble of picking them. Ko said that if their master wanted to store them, he could have used the underground storage room instead. Karen said he did not know why, but felt Tenno must have a reason for avoiding that option. Tino said he didn't mind planting them now, but the season seemed warmer than when he first arrived. With a field that large, weeds would be a problem, and he worried about how to manage everything, so he wrote. He realized he needed more stone dolls to help him. He greeted his dolls and thanked them for their hard work. With workers tending the field, he decided to check on the lake. Water looked clearer than before, nearly pristine. He wanted to make soy sauce, but didn't know how to grow soybeans. If the lake had fish, he could try making fish sauce instead. A TV show he had seen said fish sauce is made by mixing fish with salt and letting it ferment. He often picked up random bits of knowledge like that. Fluffy came to him, and he thanked Fluffy for his efforts. He said the laughter might have been trying to tell him something, but he didn't understand it then. Hidden picked up a rod and began fishing, explaining he had tried to make something like a fish hook, so it should work. He also said they would fish for food. After a while, something unexpected appeared on the ground and surprised everyone. 10 of them thought they had caught something and started to wonder if it had a mouth. He thanked Fluffy, thinking it was all Fluffy's doing, and they agreed there was enough to make fish sauce. After they had enough, they could stock up on fish sauce and grill the rest. He hadn't eaten fish in a long time. At the castle, Miss Lost told the king everything, and the mage beside him looked surprised and asked whether the report was true. The gamers were watching Miss Lost return and wondered how it was possible because less than a month had passed. One of them thought something had happened. A man approached gamers and told him that all the commanders had been ordered to assemble in the audience chamber. After everyone had gathered, the bald man, looking lost, asked him if he could identify the cause of the crack in the magic stone. Nizlost, a warrior loyal to this country, always carried out orders without fear. However, at the time, he felt judged without just cause and expected punishment for no reason. He explained that as they reached the forest entrance, they suddenly ran into a wall of light. By the time he came to, all the slaves had already escaped. Even the fangs of their enhanced beasts had been torn out. Caught in such a bewildering situation, he tried to make a sound. Surprised, the man asked if they had not died, and Miss Lost replied that it seemed preposterous. Clearly annoyed, the king stood up to leave, and the man asked where he was going. I felt the situation was completely insane. The king then ordered the 4th chivalric order to stay on standby until further notice. When the others left, Gamble called Miss Lost a coward. Miss Lost and the man who had gone on the mission with him stood there, both worried as Gamers approached. Gamers said he was relieved they had returned safely. Miss Lost admitted he still didn't fully understand what had happened. He then asked Gamers what he thought was happening in the forest. It looked normal, but Ms. Lost shared his fear, explaining that the forest seemed to reject them. Ms. Lost truly thought they were dead after passing through the wall of light. However, all the slaves had escaped, yet the soldiers showed no unusual behavior, leaving him completely puzzled about what had happened. Gammer thought it might have been a warning, and guessed that if any creature larger than the Forest King existed, it could be responsible. Miss Lost asked if Gamers meant the Forest King was behind it all. Gamers said it might have been possible, but since the Forest King was so strong, they would have noticed it much earlier. In that situation, it was possible that a creature greater than the forest had come to reside there. Deeply troubled, the king walked down the corridor, unable to believe that all the slaves had stayed. The idea seemed absurd, even if it were possible. That meant the slave crests, empowered by the magic stone, had become ineffective. He said it was impossible because offerings had been made to the magic stone for more than 100 years, making it stronger. King looked outside, mind racing, believing the country's protective barriers were still working. Something might be wrong with the enhanced beasts they released into the forest. He suspected they had regained consciousness from the magic stone. By using the magic stone, they could draw on the forest's power and become the world's rulers. Always obedient to the gods, he used the forest's magic to keep its beasts from fighting back. No acts of resistance had occurred in the last 10 years. Just a few more steps and it would have been over. Laughing in front of the two women, he soon grew angry. Drawing his sword, he wondered why it had to happen then. Enough, he muttered, his voice low with fury. The forest will be burned down. The panel prepared to make the fish sauce and explain how it was made. The first step was to remove the head, internal organs, and blood so the fish could be cut cleanly. Silver ornite sliced through the fish with ease. The next day he preserved the fish with salt, stressing that the right amount was crucial and calculating how much to use based on the quantity of fish they had. For that size of fish, 20% salt will be enough. He went on to say the first step was to rub enough salt into the fish. Then they put the salted fish into a jar and sealed it tightly with no gaps. He continued until the jar was full, added a little more salt to be safe, and then moved on. They put the jar in a container, covered it, and said it needed to be kept in a cold, dark place for about 1 to 2 years. Since the world's magic could change the result, Tenno decided to store it for 3 months instead. By then the texture had thickened, and he could smell fermentation. He used magic to speed the process and age it to about a year. Ko wondered what the master was doing now. Shuri didn't know, but she smelled something good in the air. Tenno used magic to make the sauce successfully, but when he smelled it, he recoiled. Despite the unpleasant smell, it was unique, and with the fish meat broken down, he decided it would be enough. All that remained was to strain the mixture through a fine cloth. Following his plan, he was pleased to see the sauce turn a beautiful light brown. A precious drop of perfection. When he tried it, he found the saltiness perfectly balanced and delicious. Now it was time to heat the mixture to stop fermentation and start cooking. Ko watched MSC cooked, then I prepared it on the barbecue. He had frozen the rest of the fish, so they decided to enjoy grilled fish that day, and since they'd be back soon they planned to grill Karen's share too. When the fish was fully cooked, they turned it over and drizzled a few drops of fish sauce. The smell of the food filled the air, then Surf himself took a bite. A completely different expression crossed his face, leaving Chief and Ko Laptwary unsure of his reaction. His face lit up, the fish tasted incredible with the sauce, and he wished he had some rice to go with it. His efforts had finally paid off, he had too. He savored the moment and noticed the wolves moving toward the fish. Quickly, he took it from them and told them to wait because the food was too salty for them to eat. Their stare intimidated him. He replied, "All right, each of them will get 1 drop." He realized he still needed to grow Karen's share. A sudden noise made him turn and see Shuri. He told her to stop scaring him. He joked that he'd rather have the grilled meat, and now he could finally eat in peace. Just as he was about to enjoy his meal, the chief walked over to take a bite. Eating the fish, he said it was incredibly tasty. He couldn't let his mind wander. Chief watched the others eat too. That night he collapsed onto the wolf, saying the day had been really tiring. There was nothing better than a fluffy bed right now. Touching the wolf's fur, he was amazed at how the monsters were slowly evolving. It was truly fascinating. The pelt felt incredibly soft. The next day he decided to check the fields. The little ones might as well be called the farming squad now, he thought. Walking into the field, he greeted the dolls and said his clothes looked like they'd been upgraded. Seeing the dolls work alongside ants in the field, he decided to help them. He asked if they needed anything, but they didn't respond. Shocked, he hadn't realized they didn't need him anymore. Make sure you arrive with something in hand. They asked Tenno to pour his magic into it. Chief revealed a larger item of his own. Tenno told them. He'd be glad to help. He didn't know what he was supposed to do. Watching them use magic on the items, Tenno wondered if they were really trying to pour it. He asked whether it was enough, but they still wanted him to add his magic. When the items began to crack, Tenno apologized, realizing he might have overdone it. Small insects resembling Shuri and Chief suddenly started crawling out of the cracks. 10 of them screamed loudly in surprise. After that, 10 of them walked away with Ko and the others, apologizing for screaming so loudly. Feeling sorry for Shuri and Chief, he admitted he had never been good with bugs, and if those creatures had been centipedes, he would have been terrified. Chief rode on Kai's back, and Tina wondered if it was okay for Chi to give him a ride. Tenno told Ko that walking with him again felt good after such a long time. While petting Ko, he asked Shay if he could ride him too. The chair rejected the idea, turning away. Then he thought that they had seemed to be getting along lately, but maybe they did not like the attention he had been giving to Ko. Che disagreed and insisted it was not true. Someone teased Chai, saying don't tell me he was getting jealous. Chai said it wasn't like that, then looked around. Both Ko and Tenno found his reaction cute. Standing in front of another cave, he remarked that there were certainly many caves in the forest. As they reached the cave entrance, 10 of them noticed something inside. Wolf-like creatures were growling at them. At the castle, many mages and knights stood before the king. A man announced that 25 mages from the 2nd Chavoric Order would escort them, while the 5th Chavoric Order would subdue the monsters. The gamers realized this was the result of their discussion. Then the king said he had spared the forest beasts until now and that everything he had done was for the country's glory. Despite his repeated acts of mercy, the beasts kept resisting and his patience wore thin. That's why he decided to set the forest on fire. The knights knew why they'd been called. Now it was time to prove themselves. Many gamers wondered whether this could work. The mages wielded fearsome power, and the monsters stood no chance against the battle-hardened knights of the 5th Chavoric Order. They were probably not facing the true kings of the forest. Back at Tenno, the beasts closed in to attack him. A barrier made by the Tenno forced them to fall back. Chi addresses the wolves, telling them to stop acting foolish and pull themselves together. He looked at Tenno, who used his binding magic to trap the beasts in a cage. He praised being trapped as a good thing. Just as the thought came, he told Shane not to worry. Then he released them. After freeing them, all the beasts suddenly collapsed, spitting blood from their mouths. Startled, Tina immediately moved to heal them. He realized the beasts were chaste friends and looked severely malnourished. A feeling welled up inside him, and he muttered he would never forgive whoever did this to them. Meanwhile, inside the castle, the king told his subjects to show the forest kings how terrifying the Envelis kingdom can be. His words stoked their anger, and with a gesture the king sent a bolt of lightning into the sky. Within a few days, Tenno tripled the farming squad's size, and soon after a small lake appeared beside the field. Tenno offered the ants the land if they would till it. Passing by, Fluffy stopped at the water and formed a pool to pour onto the ground. Tino apologies said he didn't understand what Fluffy had said. They wondered whether Fluffy was suggesting cutting down the trees to expand the lake. Later, Tenno kept working and went home, saying the day had been particularly rough. Spiders appeared and urged him to follow. As they led him to the storeroom, he noticed something and wondered if it was wrong. Entering, Tenno saw the once empty shelves now full. Realizing they needed more space in the storeroom to keep their harvest and make sure they had enough food for the winter, 10 of them decided to enlarge the room. Freezing time in the chilling room, he found the dolls removing the locks. He also noticed the dolls had arranged everything neatly and efficiently, like professionals placing each item in its proper spot. As Tina was about to help, he hesitated, not sure it was necessary. That's why he went hunting with Ko. Ko told Tenno in his own language to sometimes follow his heart. As he turned his head, Tenno called out, asking him to wait. They set out to hunt together. After a while, they reached the barrier's edge. Tenno said that apart from the detour, it had taken them 2 hours to get there. He wondered whether it was even possible to expand the barrier any further. A dragon soon appeared. They growled together at the dragon. As the dragon prepared to attack, Ko tried to shield Tenno. Karen flew overhead, glad to have returned early, and he always felt great inside Tino's magical barrier. On spotting the waver, he noted how rare it was to see one. Karen saw Tennant on the ground and realized wyverns had tough, sturdy outer bodies, so normal attacks likely wouldn't work, and he decided to step in and take action. Unexpectedly, Tenov struck the wyver in midair, severing one of its wings. Karen and the wolves froze in shock, and Tino, surprised, realized his reflexes had kicked in after his previous encounter, and though he had not expected to sever the wing, it happened automatically as if he had trained for it. After the wyver was defeated, Tenno asked Ko if they could eat it. Ko's reaction made it clear it would be delicious. Noticing Karen, Tenno smiled, welcomed him, and asked why he looked so surprised. On their way home, Ko gave Chi his share of the wyver meat, and Chi thanked him for it. The dolls kept Tenno from getting a clear look at the work. Tenno had worried that Chi would leave after finding his friends, but that worry proved unfounded. Tenno shall. Out of frustration, they wondered whether anything had changed since then and where the source of the curse might be. A lightning strike hit the castle beside the king, leaving him stunned and wondering if he was under attack. It seemed impossible because the country was protected by a strong barrier. Gamers sat with Miss Lost and they discussed the strike. Miss Lost was surprised to learn the king had been attacked since he had not been there to see it. He wondered how it could happen with the king's barrier in place. Gamers said the lightning strike happened right in front of the king's eyes. Miss Louse admired the barrier's strength and wanted to know the king's next move. Gamers told him the king had locked himself in the magic stone room and ordered the mages assigned to the forest to stay and reinforce the barrier with multiple layers. Miss Lost was surprised and asked why the seemingly invincible emperor acted so cowardly. The gamers replied that, given the circumstances, they had few options. The country had not been attacked for hundreds of years. The barrier that protected it had never been breached before, and Miss Lost wondered what Gamer meant. Gamers said someone had launched an attack strong enough to break through the country's barrier. That was why he was also so troubled by it. Tenno stood with Ko, wondering if the attack had missed and feeling relieved. He said the remaining pieces of the wavering were still usable and suggested they eat it. He asked the Gons to dissect the body, though he worried it might be too big for them. Still, he was impressed by how quickly they worked. Watching them carry the pieces away, he thought they'd use every part of the wavering's body and hoped the creature would rest in peace. 10 of them grilled the meat and noticed it seemed to harden when cooked. He wondered how it would taste if they dipped it in some fruit juice afterward. A wolf asked Ko whether he had ever eaten wyver meat. Ko said the meat was quite elastic, so it should be worth eating. He also caught the sweet scent of the food Tino was cooking, and Tino felt the pressure building as a boy. The sweet fruit juice mixed with an onion-like vegetable filled the air with an overwhelming aroma. After mixing the grilled wyver with sauce and a bit of seasoning, Tenom took his first bite and said it would have been perfect if he could have had it with white rice and fresh eggs. Everything was wrapped together. The wyver meat didn't taste like chicken and was disappointing. He then saw the dolls frying some of it and decided to try it. Thinking about it, he remembered a TV show about extracting oil from chameleon seeds and wondered if this world had similar flowers that could yield oil. I saw the wolves in Karen fighting over the grilled meat, while Karen insisted it was his. One of the wolves told Karen he was eating too much and there was not enough left for everyone, so they asked for larger portions and Karen told him to stop pulling and share with the others. Amid all the chaos, Tina kept telling himself he couldn't escape the crowd. He went inside and decided that although making the perfect Friday meal was still impossible, they could make something tasty by frying the pumpkins like vegetables and should try extracting oil from them. Since they could wring oil from a variety of foods, it seemed worth trying every option available. Tenonal poured magic over some seeds and tasted one. Its flavor was different, and he thought it could be used as oil. Trying another one, he found it even better. At that moment, the spiders arrived carrying a piece of fruit. Tenno thanked them and examined the seed inside. While examining it, he suddenly realized something and asked the spiders where they had found the fruit. Shine and Kuro followed as Tina walked with the spiders to the tree where they had gathered the fruit. He saw the trees clustered tightly, but they stood outside the barrier. He remembered that when he last tried to expand the barrier, Ko and the others had agreed with him. Still, he couldn't achieve what he wanted. Back with Gamers and Miss Lost, Gamers said it would take about 10 days to go from the castle entrance to the forest and several more months to reach the forest center. Miss Lost didn't fully grasp what Gamers meant. Gamers explained the plan was to burn down the forest from that location it may take 3 to 5 tries to get it right. In the meantime, Tenemistot on the ground of felt is like he is flying above the forest, using magic to survey the area. One place caught his attention. Shine asked what Tenno was doing, and Kuro said it looked like Tenno was placing a birthday wish on his body. Tenno said he would first decide the barrier size and then purify the area. Back in the magic stone room, the king sat and said confidently that no attack could break his barriers now, believing this would be the beast's final struggle. Gamers said that with more power, they could watch over not just the country, but possibly the whole world. Meanwhile, Tenno prepared to send the curse back to its source with full force. A brilliant light surrounded the magical stone, leaving all the sages gasping in shock. Tenno stood his ground and vowed he would never forget the curse placed on the land. All those curses would soon return to the caster. A ball of lightning rose above the magic stone, firing bolts that hit everyone there. Tendon declared the curses on the rivers and lakes would return, and he would purify every tree, root, and leaf. The magic stone's color changed, and both the mages and the king were stunned. Then Tenno felt a strange sensation, like something shifting inside him. A few days later, Ko patrolled the area and realized it would take more than a day to cover it all. The scene shifted back a few days to when everyone felt a strong wind approaching, and they wondered where it was coming from. He realized he could no longer sense the barrier. The chief wondered if something had happened to Master Tenno. But when he turned around, he saw the doll still working. Then Tenno arrived and asked why everyone had gathered. Ko couldn't shake the thought that Tenno had neutralized such a massive barrier effortlessly, and he wondered what they were planning. One day Tina came home and found a finished wooden deck that was incredibly spacious. He noticed sliding doors that opened and closed easily. It also had doors for every room, including a toilet and a bathroom, just as he had wanted. Looking around, he saw a doll come over to get his attention, seeming excited. All that could be seen was the massive sliding door frame they had built. After bringing stones, Tenno realized they needed glass for the doors. He used his magic to create it for them. Afterward, Tenno checked the living room and found it spotless. Wondering if he could inspect the walls, he found the dolls agreed. Doing so, he found the walls had been infused with magic, likely by the dolls and cells. After thinking about leaving it as it was, he moved on to inspect the oil extracting machine. He pressed the machine with his magic and realized he could control it further. Tendon expected to extract only a small amount of oil, but the result was better than he anticipated. The oil had a pleasant pink color and a sweet aroma that he found intriguing, and satisfied with the yield he inspected all the extracted oil and realized the extraction machine would need upgrading in the future. The fried eggplant-like vegetables had turned out delicious, he thought. She wondered whether the wolves would enjoy the fried vegetables and suggested serving them in small portions. While Tina fed the wolves, Chi came up to him. He expressed gratitude that his friends were getting better. His friends still wondered whether it was safe to trust a human. Chi replied that they had felt Tino's gentle magic. The wolves still hesitated a bit, so he smiled, said he was happy to see everyone improving, and offered them more food. While they ate, Tenno noticed the wolves really enjoyed the pumpkin-like vegetables. Someone reminded him he hadn't named them yet. He chose names for the male wolves, Chea and Chada. The one with the white spots is Chara. The female wolves would be Saw, and Sami. The one with the red spots and red eyes would be Kiza. Tino wanted to use the kanji for T in her names, and he couldn't help thinking his naming sense was impeccable. Tenno then entered another room and found the cooking area spotless. The dogs had used the meat to chase friends who were now eating happily. Tenno entered his room and sat with Ko and the others, saying it was great to finally be able to fry his food. Still wanting a frying pan, he wondered how he'd find iron ore without any magnets. Suddenly, he remembered the magnet in his wallet. Every day when they went out, they kept looking for iron ore. While examining some crystals, Tina said he was just randomly searching for iron with a small magnet and was glad he'd remembered it in his wallet. Inside the barrier, the team searched, but the area already had many caves. Tina wondered whether this area had once been volcanic. They still could not reach the mountain's innermost part, and it was already the 5th day. He thought about how many places they had visited so far. Despite finding many different stones, none was the ore he was looking for. Though he did not feel tired, the constant hunting had worn him down, so he decided it was time to head back. A dark path through the bushes caught his eye, and he wondered if it led to another cave. Using magic, he lit his surroundings and stepped onto the path. Surprised, he found a structure and wondered if it was an entrance, but it didn't feel as cold as a typical cave entrance. Spotting a blue-screened squirrel, he wondered if it was still alive, then used Purify and touched the animal. Nothing happened, but suddenly the squirrel broke free and felt. She looked at the ground and kept staring at him. He found it cute, and although wolves usually eat squirrels, these wolves seemed uninterested. He kept wondering why. Then he asked Kiza if direwolves usually ignored small animals. Kiza said one was fine. The squirrel pointed to its companions and made a sound, signaling Tenno. He realized the squirrel wanted him to save its friends. 10 of them did, and soon the squirrels gathered around him, playing with him. There were too many of them, he thought. Kiesa looked nervous as she urged them to leave and help their master. A low growl sent the squirrels scattering, and Tenno sent out a request for help. If there had been only one squirrel, he figured it wouldn't have been a problem. Heading back, Tina realized they had walked all day, visited 4 different places, and still had no luck. Finding iron ore wouldn't be easy, he admitted, but since they had plenty of time, they decided to go at their own pace. They reached the cave where Tenno had found Kisa and the others. It was only 15 minutes from home. They hadn't explored it yet, but 10 of them thought it might be pointless. He spotted a piece of metal and knew it was the one he wanted. Disappointed, he realized this key was the closest to his home, and he had wasted all his time at the other. In any case, when Tenno got home, Karen came back and said he still hadn't found any dragons that day, and Cole noted Tenno had only just arrived. Karen was startled to find a squirrel on her shoulder. It startled the squirrel, and it ran away quickly. He realized the act was a bit childish. Shuri said he understood, and added that he hadn't even known the squirrels had come into their home, and that he wasn't too fond of them. Tenham worried about how many creatures there were now, and whether they would all get along. Soon the dolls gathered in front of Tenno, leaving him confused and unsure what they wanted. They led him to the field, where he noticed they had plowed less than 2 months earlier and could now harvest only about 10% of the crops. They had only helped plant the seeds and water a few times, and he wondered if they could help with the harvest too. Scanning the area, Tenon noticed some charred vegetables, several gourds, and a large vegetable that looked like bacon. They were all huge. In the kitchen, he cut them up and said he'd never returned any of them before, but whatever they couldn't eat went into his compost. The potato-like vegetable was soft and flaky and smelled sweet, but it didn't taste good, so they put it aside. If everything went well, they could add more seasoning next time. The chief tasted it and said it was delicious, amazed the root could be so sweet. Shuri wondered if Tenno had brought more vegetables. Then he thought that if only they could eat more of that. He looked around at the others. She watched the others and wondered what they were doing in front of the garden. They stood in line and talked about it, while the chief asked for help with everything. Before Tenon realized it, a new cultivation map had been completed, and he was shocked. Nobody had even asked him about it. Later, they found iron ore and used it to make a frying pan. It reminded him of the dire wolves' long fight against an unknown enemy. When Chase's allies, consumed by darkness, attacked him, he lost himself and was ready to die. When he regained consciousness, only a few of his comrades were left, wandering around. They wondered if the place they found had been built by a king and could hide them for a while. One agreed they should rest for a while and prepare to fight the humans to the death. When it was over, one of them woke up and wondered if they had lost consciousness. A healing wind touched him, and he wondered if it was magic. His body felt lighter and his mind clearer as he called out to the others to check if they were still alive. Not in the best condition, he could still catch small prey thanks to the healing wind. Scanning the forest, he saw the Mayesim were gone and wondered if the threat had moved on. Another wolf approached him and said it would join the first wolf on the hunt. The first wolf thanked him and said they should help their other comrades too. A sound came from the entrance. Cheyenne-ko surprised them all. They concluded it couldn't be a dark wolf because it was so large. A spider appeared as well. When Tenno arrived, they were shocked and called him the enemy. Ko and Chi both found them intimidating as they looked at them. Back in the present, Tennant was shocked to see Ko and Che had grown larger. He wondered why every part of cultivating the land and harvesting the crops had to be worked out by trial and error. To try something different, 10 of them decided to use the materials they had found while exploring the caves. He also discovered that the small spiders could spin threads. Chai could use magic too, so Tina wondered whether Chai and the others had changed or evolved. Inside the cave, the pups huddled, and Tenon noticed they appeared to have lost their will to fight. He chose to use Purify, Dispel, Heal, and Cleanse on all of them. A wolf said the power he was using was the same as the healing wind that filled the forest. Ko-Greed said their master had purified the forest and restored their powers. Surprised, the wolf accepted it as true, and the king of the forest looked up to their master, who was a kind, magical being. Tenel watched Chai and at first thought Chai looked more like a dog than anything. He wanted Chai to stay that size forever because being looked down on felt intimidating. All of them were heading toward their house, built into a giant rock, and the wide area around it had been completely cleared. Tina said he couldn't quite picture how wild the place had been. They wondered if the field in the middle of their home had simply become a forest. It seemed that way. That morning was ordinary. The chief welcomed Tenno, said they had followed the Golan's instructions, and planted all the trees that would bear the fruits Tenno wanted in one area, thanked his clan for their hard work, and Shuri added that his clan had worked several times harder than the chief's plan required. Shocked, the dire walls saw the giant bugs, and some even fainted. Tenno looked into the forest and noticed it was well maintained. Besides the vegetation he had planted, there were about 90 known tree species and nearly 200 trees that bore fruit. That was impressive, and now they had 30 plants that produced excellent fruit. It made him wonder how they had managed to plant so much in only half a day. He went to the kitchen and said that with the right tools, he could make wine from the grapes. They should also promote the vegetables from the land they just cultivated, since they planned to use them for seasoning. Now they had an iron pot. It took him about a month to forge a frying pan from the iron ore, and he could easily spot useful stones and metal ores. It included a multi-purpose rock he used instead of charcoal at home, and for his one-eyed gom, and the rock was easy to process and had magical properties. Despite iron being hard to manufacture, he still made the cooking utensils he wanted. Tools forged from silver and gold ores lasted longer, but required much more magic to craft. These materials were especially useful for making glass windows and knives, and had low thermal conductivity. Picking up a stone, he said the fluffy creatures seemed to really like the blue and red glowing ores they found while exploring the cave. He made a translucent bottle from them, though it had lost its luster over time. Gathering the stones, including the magic-strengthening ones that appeared regularly in the hearts of certain monsters, he was sure they would be even more useful someday. First, the Irish cobble-like potatoes tasted faint, but he could grind them into flour because he had learned how on TV, so it should be easy enough. All that was left was to grate the potatoes on the silver grater. Dipping the mixture, he said the next step was to wrap the grated potatoes in a dry cloth and press them tightly, which produced a white, fluffy consistency. They left it for 20 minutes, discarded the water, and repeated the process. He soaked the potatoes, poured off the water each time as solids built up in the bottom, then moved the solid lumps from the container onto 2 plates to dry. He kept using the method and eventually succeeded. Looking around, he saw the new lumps resting on top while the others, though rare, also came from outside. After everyone settled into their houses, he felt lonely because the houses were so large and there were more dolls around. Next, he chose to cook rabbit, since it was the closest thing to chicken at the time. He rubbed it with salt, coated it in flour, then cooked it in the iron pot. The pot felt different, but he soon found his courage. Tasting it, he was overcome with emotion and realized there was truly nothing like courage. As he took another bite, he saw a spider approaching. He offered it some food and told it to keep it secret. Afterward, he stood up and walked, feeling a little scared, and said he would keep the remaining flour. Waiting, he thought about cutting the sweet and bitter scraps, figured he could make sugar from them, and remembered his mother once making sugar from beetroot. It turned out there was a lot of scum, making the mixture taste bitter. After skimming off the scum, he kept heating the mixture until it thickened and turned purple. He continued the process, removing the solidified parts and spreading them over a wide surface to cool. Tasting it, he found it sweet with a deep umami flavor. Outside, a strange creature kept watch over them. Go caught the scent of food and said it seemed their master was preparing the next meal. Chair said he had never smelled anything so sweet before and found it intriguing. When Karen arrived, someone told her there had been no success again. Heron, puzzled, said she had searched every nook and cranny of the barrier every day, while Koja sat back and replied that they were properly protecting their master. 10 of them came in with the meal and said it was time to eat. Everyone gathered to eat, and Tenno explained he had mixed the sugar he made that day with the fish sauce from earlier, creating a red meat teriyaki. The flavor was so good he said it was beyond words, and Ko agreed it tasted amazing. Karen H. said all the hard work had paid off, and she had worked tirelessly, flying through the miasma in search of dragons. Sheer said he had been strongly sensing a dragon lately, and found it odd that none had been found, and Karen agreed that it could be good news, while noting that finding a dragon was tricky. Karen from OT said she was making too many excuses. The chief stepped in, admitting they could not deny Karen was doing her best, and Karen said they should be grateful for it. Just then they saw a beast sneak up on Tenor without anyone noticing and start eating the food. Everyone realized it was an earth dragon, and Tenno explained. Drying had joined them only recently. Watching Fluffy soar across the sky, Tenna saw the dragon fly away and noticed it could do so without using its wings. It looked different, but perhaps Fluffy and the dragon were the same species. He wondered why he'd assumed they were the same species. Inside the house, a pet dog was completely terrified by what was happening in front of it. At the castle, the magic stone room had been badly damaged, its stones covered in scratches. The king inspected it, convinced there was nothing wrong with the barrier. A member of his crew said it was impossible, but the mages would find the problem within a month. The 4 had forgotten they were entrusted with the blessings of the king's magic stone. The mages agreed the king was right. The king once bound them with non-aging magic while testing his magic stone, and the headmage thought they were now reaping what they had sown. Only the 4 of them knew that every life sacrificed to the magic stone had been used to prolong their lives and keep the barrier intact. Back then, they believed that might made right. The mage warned that the world would never forgive them, then he left. They believed the forest kings were trembling as they suppressed the magic stone's power, which meant the forest had become a threat to the country. He wondered how many more lies he would have to give up to fix the magic stone. It was thought the country had now brought the world's wrath upon itself. The chiefs in the field near the rock house noticed the small spiders and realized the children had recently started changing their traits. The basic strategy was to cloak themselves in hellfire and use speed to overwhelm the enemy, or at least that was how it was supposed to work. Whenever the master saw them, he projected an image showing how to move the threads, and the chief asked the children whether they had tried it. He found that instead of simply running, they could catch their prey by shooting their threads faster, and they had developed their abilities enough to even set traps. The chief guessed should try it himself, and he thought their idea was brilliant. Tenno called the dragon a flying lizard, but the name felt wrong, and the heat stopped him from thinking of anything better. Besides, it wasn't even a lizard to begin with. He mentioned Kanako because it was brown, and since it looked like a dinosaur, he thought of names like Rex or Terra. Trying different names, he got no response from the dragon. However, calling it a flying lizard again drew a small reaction from the dragon, continuing. Regarding the naming, 10 of them decided to name the dogs too. He named the leader I. The male dogs were renamed Sora and Nu, while the female dogs were renamed Amy, Ayu, and Myra. Proud of the names he had given them, he noticed their coats were indigo blue, and they looked so similar he had to be careful not to mix them up. Then he jumped into the lake to bathe, saying it felt so cool, but the heat was intense, the temperature nearly 40 degrees Celsius, and he assumed it must be summer in that world. Floating on the water, he noted the river running through the forest was beautiful. He was surprised to see they had almost built all the way to the river, and the fields and orchards kept growing larger. He looked up to see 2 wolves flying overhead, carrying trees with their magic. Tina realized how they were moving the trees. Both trees in the walls looked like they were floating, which made the world seem amazing. Weary from the summer heat, Ko said the seasons from years past seemed to have faded, and he blamed their master's power, Che mentioned. This was his first time experiencing it, and he now knew how intense summer could feel. Someone else said it could be hard to endure. He noted the chief seemed unusually lively at that time. Chase said it was to be expected from someone called the Death Keeper. Even the king of the Fenrir couldn't stand such intense heat, and Kogral claimed he could cool things with his magic, though he was actually enjoying the heat after so long. The chief ignored him, said something felt off, and that our master had not been doing well, and the other man agreed he had noticed the same. Feeling dizzy, he thought he should leave the water soon. He suddenly wondered what he was riding on. Looking around, he thought it might be. He was in amoeba, but it felt different. Its eyes were small and it didn't seem evil. It felt cool and pleasant, so he figured it was fine. Just then someone arrived and said in his language that Tenna was playing with the water spirits, who were drawn to pure magical energy, but had never seen a whole group like that before. They warned Tino not to share too much mana with them. At that moment, Tino suddenly spit something out, making. The chief wondered if he was unwell. Ko came to check, but Tina reassured them that he was fine. When he began preparing the meal, Tina remained fine. I can't believe the meat and potatoes you prepared this morning were gone in an instant. Everyone was fighting over the food, and he wondered whether to make 3 times as much next time, figuring he would need at least 3 more big pots or maybe 5. He added that if the one-eyed Galem could also help with cooking, they might avoid such a scramble. To make that work, he would need a larger cooking area and more charcoal. Gold stores, the heat was so intense he couldn't think clearly, and my head was spinning. Inside the castle, many slaves stood before a group of mages. A mage said there were at least 100 of them and ordered them sent to the magic storeroom. With so many, they can repair the magic stone. Another. For mage, review the situation and advise that they assess progress and increase the number as necessary. He reminded the others that these slaves were born to serve as disposable warriors. Researchers research materials or labor for the lowest jobs. In their country, that was the rule, and anyone who objected was publicly executed. Now no one dared to speak up. Many people believed it was a necessary sacrifice for a prosperous life, and that was the reality of their nation. Tenno floated on the amoeba in the river, watching the sun. It didn't seem like he had a fever, he said, but the heat might be keeping him from sleeping. Feeling good helped him relax. I heard rustling and saw gallums, small ants, and spiders at work. Believing that if he played every day his heart would eventually start to bake, he keeps playing. They decided to stay by the river and focus on ways to prevent the curse. No one knew if any civilized humans lived in that world, but humans were usually behind curses. There might be humans somewhere, he thought, though he felt they weren't in a forest, and the fact that the world looked like nothing but forest only made him even more certain people must exist. He longed to see them standing before him, and his mind drifted to the curse. The castle's slaves were being led to the magic stone room. In Japan, Tenem noticed curses were often aimed at a specific person, and while the whole place might be cursed, he regarded that as only his theory. This place might be cursed by earthbound spirits. Glancing at the lizard, he muttered that it shouldn't be possible. The situation began to feel oddly amusing. The scariest thing of all was the shadow that clung to them. They suspected Ko and Karon were possessed by it. If they found it, they needed to purify it immediately. Shuri and the others were being possessed by a malicious curse. Crime did not exist. Curses are not inherently good or bad. The wolves wandered around and felt a strange sensation. Tino explained that possession slowly erodes a person and said he was unsure whether it was a curse or something demonic, and he no longer believed purification would work on demons. The idea of demons feeding on sacrifices and using that power to dominate the world sounded like something from a movie he had seen. Dazed by the intense heat, he didn't care. Both were enemies, and he decided to terminate them all. Then he realized something. It was oddly fun. To prevent demons summoning, what kinds of magic circles would be needed? He could not picture how the magic circle would look. If it's not a demon but a curse, it's better to deal with the root cause, whether it's tied to a person or an object. If sacrifices were truly required, it would be deadly. They had to find a way to deal with it first. The scene then shifted to the slaves being killed. A mage believed that once the technique was activated, everything would be resolved. Only one thing remained: investigate the cause without letting their emotions interfere in a place like that. Tenon felt a strange shift in his thoughts as he studied the magic circles, and because he knew little about them, he pictured using a black stone, but the thought that the perpetrator had died and the sacrifice was sealed in the stone left a bitter taste in his mouth. Deciding to put them to sleep, he also arranged for them to forget the method entirely, because erasing their memories seemed the best option. A curse would be too troublesome to handle, so he pictured the black stone again and doubled his retaliation as he had done before. He would then seal it off so the curse could never escape, making it seem like part of a shrine. Meanwhile, the mage is in the castle where we are channeling their power into the magic stone. With force, he activated his magic, sending a surge of energy into the sky. At the same time, the magic stone in the castle began to react, releasing energy that made everyone step back in shock. Confused, the slaves looked around as the mages fumbled for words. Their spellwork was clearly disrupted. Even the chief mage had fallen. The chief Beef Mage immediately used his power to try to heal the magic stone. 10 of his thoughts snapped into focus as he tried to figure out what the mage was doing. His head suddenly cleared, and he suspected his earlier confusion was caused by dehydration. Standing up, he told himself to go back to bed early, and then realized he could have used magic to cool the house, wondering why he hadn't thought of it sooner. The scene shifted to slaves being led through the forest by guards, with some of them already in the woods. Injured, they reached the kingdom of Antor, a neighboring country to Envela's empire after asking for help. King Ismelade of Antor wondered whether they were runaway slaves from the empire or spies. A knight noted that the slave crests, once symbols of the empire's power, no longer appeared on them. Meliod asked if the knight was sure about this, and the knight said the court mage was interrogating the slaves right now. One of the slaves lay on a bed and said they were part of a troop sent to scout the forest. The slave soldiers could not speak unless ordered, so they guarded their words and felt distant from everything. A white light washed over them, their senses snapping back, and they all fled. Sanlead asked how long ago that had happened. The slaves replied they had been wandering the forest for about a month. While Ismelio discussed the matter with his ministers, one reported that a strange light had appeared in the forest last month, and another suggested the Empire might be responsible. Smelly said that despite sharing a border with the Envela Empire, the forest had kept invasions at bay as a natural buffer. Someone suggested they should put more value on the forest. Someone else agreed, saying they shouldn't look too closely into it. A man of standing then spoke up, saying they must investigate further, because finding the original slave who broke the crest might reveal a clue on how to fight the Envela Empire, Ismelate commented. It seemed Amigal had finally spoken up and was only looking for an excuse to study the magic, but he quickly replied that it was not his intention. Smelly admitted it was still a good opportunity, and declared they would carry out a long overdue survey of the forest because he was curious about what was really going on there. In the forest, a grape-like crop was being gathered, and Tina said it was a good harvest, and he planned to harvest the crops before the heat got worse. Baskets with dolls tied on, and the tools needed to pull everything in came with him. He said that ever since he came up with the idea of lowering the temperature around his body, he had felt much better. He nearly had a heat stroke last time, and though his memory of using magic was hazy, he might have done it. The details slipped from his memory, and his body felt unusually light. Ko approached and he hugged Ko, sensing that since then a steady presence had stayed by his side. He then asked the beasts not to crowd him, wondering if they wanted the fruit, but he knew they would not get it. They all avoided him and agreed their master did not seem to have changed. The chief said the way of magic was not a small matter. I'll assume Tenno's poor health was caused by overusing his magic to power the barrier and the golems, which likely consumed a lot of energy. Suddenly, a massive blast of pure magic surged, and Sheer said he had never seen or heard anything like it. A sudden loss of magic could be fatal, and no one thought it could happen. Ko moved closer to Tenno, sensing that Tenno's magic had stabilized. Tenno told him not to do it. Cole looked at the grapes and said he could make some wine now, realizing he had been so focused on the essentials that he hadn't given it much thought. Hearing wine mentioned, he brightened, gathered all the grapes into a large container, and said he would actually prefer beer but didn't know how to make it. Wine seemed easier because all he needed were barrels. Then the Gons started crushing grapes with their feet in a clean tub. The work was hard, but it was fun. They filled barrels with the juice, and Tenno said he would let it ferment, then transfer it to clean jars and move them to the basement where the temperature stayed steady. While similar to other grapes, these fermented with the natural yeast on their skins. Making the barrels was his next task, and he had plenty of wood to use. 6 months in, the process remained difficult because he had chosen a hard wood that would not bend easily. After struggling to make them all the same shape, he thought he had succeeded, but the barrels collapsed because of a leak. They needed a new approach. Tino then cut the trees differently and co-adrived, telling him they had been keeping an eye on him and asking what he was up to that day. Tino explained that first they had to strip the bark, then dry it. Shuri, eager to try the final product, said he did not know what Tino was doing but wanted to taste the sweet treat, secretly admitting he did not like sweets. Shuri added that the Gons were only watching. Ko said it did not look like today's food. Karen, curious, asked what Tina was doing. Ten-Ohm mentioned the huge tree he planned to cut into 1-meter-tall slices. He planned to use teleportation magic to cut them into barrels and hollow out the insides. Having done this monthly, he found the process very convenient, and now he just had the car about the bun. In the basement, he lined up all the barrels, thinking he should make room first. Cut to Envelis Kingdom, where the king shouted at a mage, demanding to know why they could not repair the magic stone. The sage said they had tried many times but always failed, and the mage who tried to repair it had lost all his memories and his magic. The king scoffed, calling it a simple task they'd done countless times before, and saying if they didn't have enough slaves, they should breed more and try again. The sage noted that unless they identified the root cause, it would happen again. The king asked what had happened to the sorcerers who attempted the repair. The major said everyone was locked in their rooms. The king had them executed, saying he had no use for incompetence. Shocked, the mage protested that they had served the king faithfully, but the king ignored them and ordered the knights to execute them immediately. Night had ended and the king took his throne, ordering the mage to restore the magic stone at once. The mage agreed and left the room. Irritated, the king thought about how useless the magic stone barrier was and how its cracks could not be repaired, feeling he must be overlooking something. Cursing the fools who had failed him, he still felt dread at the thought of lightning. He wondered what he'd do once he found its source. He wondered if it was a foreign attack using the forest as cover, but he quickly dismissed the idea. I dismissed the thought. They were cowards, too weak to stand against the strongest one. Growing irritation made him order the knights to entertain him. Many slaves were soon brought before the king, who said it had been a while since he had done this, and decided that in times like these, it was best to torture some of them. Drawing his sword, he told the mage that anyone who thought the king would tire of such things after centuries was wrong, and the king was just getting started. Gamers couldn't believe he was about to watch the king do it again. Since joining the knights full of hopes and dreams, he had been honored to guard the king, yet he had. This never felt familiar to him. He knew he shouldn't, but he had no. Could stop the king who wielded both the sword and the barrier. After centuries of feeding on the lives of its sacrifices, that sinister magic sword had become the most powerful of all. Players flinched whenever the king drew his sword. Smiling cruelly, the king told them to rejoice because the slaves would soon become one with his blade. The slaves trembled in silence, but when the king's sword began to shine, it confused them and even the king. An attack hit the king's sword, and gamers immediately recognized it as an enemy assault. He immediately ordered the knights to protect the king. The knights moved quickly, but there was no sign of the enemy. Players grew uneasy as they realized something was wrong. The mage called to the king, who stood completely stunned. They continued talking to him, and the king wondered what they meant and why the man had dropped his sword. Then something touched his body and caused him pain. He demanded they stop touching him, but looking at his hand, he saw it was bleeding and, puzzled, asked the sage to heal him. Certain he was heavily warded, the king mentioned his sword, and the sage told him not to stand yet. King wondered what had happened during a night approach game, and informing him that there were no signs of the enemy. The timers agreed, still stunned they had wounded their king. Then he excused the mages and asked to examine the sword. The mage agreed, and as gamers examined the blade, he wondered whether it was the same sinister magical sword. Still, he couldn't sense any power in it. It was just an ordinary sword. A rope wrapped around it looked like ordinary grass, and he wasn't sure, but it appeared to be the same material used to wrap the magic stone. It seemed to be an attack from the forest, like the strike on the magic stone, and he wondered why they were doing this. They clearly didn't know enough. He realized he would need. A person spoke up to gather intelligence before making any decisions, asking who they were and what they were. They wanted something from him. Gamers wondered what this was about. The sage explained that the maid had activated the king's sword, and the king had been like that since he woke. The gamers recognized it as the same fate that had befallen the mage who tried to repair the stone. Both were trying to make a sacrifice, and the uneasy feeling he had just now was likely connected to it. He looked at the slaves, then at the crack that had appeared in the wall, and realized the king might have been stopped. Gamers remembered him reading his grandfather's fairy tales as a child. One of them included a description of the forest where the trees would sway gently in the breeze, and the forest would keep blessings for the people. Once a beastman had saved him while he was traveling there. That left him jealous of stories that said some could even see the kings of the forest. Gamers had long wanted to see them too, but given the country's current state, he couldn't discuss those thoughts with anyone. Now the scene shifted to the present, and Gamel was clearly annoyed. Gamers could tell he was bothered by something. Someone remarked it was a fancy coincidence to run into Gamers there. Gamers noticed that Gamel didn't seem to want to be there and looked quite upset. Demal admitted he had hoped to finally let loose in the forest, but had been held back, still wanting to hunt some beasts. A man then described an incident involving the king and warned them to be cautious. Acknowledging the warning, Gamble made a final comment about wanting to go wild and left. Gamer weighed his options and considered how to use the situation to his advantage, but first he needed to check something. After that, Gamer set off to borrow some slaves. As he entered the chamber, he immediately noticed a strange smell, and the man apologized, saying the cleaning crew hadn't arrived on time. He glanced at the slaves and chose a few he wanted. The man asked whether Gamers intended to cut them all down, noting there aren't many slaves left, and a request was made for Gamers to leave some of the females behind. Gamer refused, saying he needed them for a special mission and might need to borrow them again. He told the man to mark them for future use, the auditorium. A breeze quickly ushered in a comfortable season. Tenno stood watched the weather and said he had been right. Finding the wheat in their fields pleased him and brought him great joy. He noticed that distant place while expanding the barrier, and the day and a half it took to get there was worth it. As she approached him, Tenno could tell she was happy too. Tina hesitated, wondering whether the wheat was really as tasty as it looked. He thought Karen would probably eat some if she were here. Shine said their master could make anything taste good. Tenno admired the wheat and said it looked exactly as it should. Perhaps the Wayne had carried the seeds there from somewhere. After trying it, he told the others to hold the plant tips while he used magic to reap the harvest. Together they gathered the wheat. Everyone kept helping Tenno, and he would. Grateful there were grains in the world, he hoped to turn them into something delicious. Finishing up, he realized everyone must be worried and suggested they head back home. In a playful mood, Hio sat down and told Tenno to climb onto his back because it would be faster. Stunned but delighted, it still felt fine to ride high. Hio agreed, known as Tenno mounted, leaped into the sky, propelled by magic. Soaring at incredible speed, Tina was startled by how fast they were going and felt both thrilled and terrified. When they returned, Ko greeted them, noted that Tenno had been gone for almost 2 days, and asked where he had been, clearly worried. Tenno gave a reassuring smile that showed he was back. Hio, sensing Kasa's concern, said he had expected Kasa's reaction and had brought Tenno home as quickly as possible. Ko expressed his appreciation, and Tenno marveled that they had returned in just 3 hours after what would normally be more than a day's journey. Meanwhile, attention turned to the king, who told Gamel that once his night order was ready they should seize the forest and bring him anyone who had defied him. Gamel replied eagerly that he had been waiting for such orders and vowed to capture anyone who opposed the king and bring them before him. Gamel was told to take whatever he wanted, and he asked for some of the wizards and slaves. The king asked if the game had some kind of plan, and Gamel replied he would take as much as he needed. After Gamma left the room, the king regretted not sending Gamma out sooner. He said the fifth commander would take care of their duties. At that moment night fell, and he excused himself while presenting a report from the slave manager. They gestured for him to speak and asked what it was about, but he seemed unconcerned. The knight reported some slaves had begun acting strangely, and the king asked whether something was wrong with the crests. That knight made it clear the report said nothing about the crests. Deep in thought, the king ordered all slaves who showed these changes to be killed and replaced, as he couldn't wait to see who Gamble would bring back. Meanwhile, the scene moved to Tenno carrying a basket of fruit. He said the day before had been rough, but flying through the sky was amazing, and he wanted to try it again, this time more slowly. Walking, he saw the fallen trees and realized they were already decaying. At first, he thought it was his imagination, but things were decomposing much faster than in Japan. Usually compost took about a month to become usable, but here it would likely be ready in only 2 weeks, as he was. Upon closer inspection, he noticed one pile had been composted with magic, while the other was left to decompose naturally, and the naturally composted pile had a better color and smell. Watching the water carry the fruit away, he said he had also tested the compost on vegetables. Those grown with natural compost were clearly superior in color. The texture and steam thickness were noticeably different. He realized they wouldn't have to worry about food if the compost worked properly. He once believed magic was all-powerful, but when it came to vegetables and compost, microbes played an important role. He wondered if magic affected living things. It suggested natural fermentation might be better for making fish toss and wine, so he decided to check the wine sooner rather than later. The thought of wine excited him, and almost to his surprise, he felt a slight tremor in his hands. He wondered aloud what was wrong as he shook his head, and 10 of them began preparing. He planned the food pairing, weighing charcoal-cooked meat against magic-cooked meat, and deciding to try some vegetables grown with magic. Testing showed that using as little magic as possible, when growing and cooking, the vegetables produced the best results, because too much magic made the texture spongy and spoiled the taste. With plenty of time, he decided to grow the vegetables slowly and cook them the traditional way, then ate the meal and told himself he'd take it easy and process the wheat that day. Then he began thrashing the wheat that the wind had thoroughly dried. It was easy and enjoyable. The next day, he saved the proceeds for their next crop and care. Remove the large, unwanted pieces carefully. The gallons helped him, and he thanked them for their assistance. Next, he rubbed the wheat between 2 boards to remove the husks. Carving grooves into the boards might make things easier, he thought, but after 3 hours of work, they still weren't finished. A look at the Golan's work reminded them they still needed to remove the chaff, so they dropped the wheat from a height and let the wind carry the husks away. Some of the chaff still clung together, so he considered strengthening the winds. When he did, everything got mixed up again. Apologizing to the Gons for the mistake, he tried to. Tenno said it had taken a while, but now it was time to let the wheat dry thoroughly before milling it into flour. Choosing the living room ensured no one would disturb it. He asked the Gallons to watch it so the squirrels would not eat it. At that moment, Kuro appeared and asked if he could eat the wheat. Tenno told him it was off limits for now. Stepping in, Kuro told Kuro not to cause trouble for their master, and curious, asked whether Ko was wondering what their master had been spending all his time making. Covert said it was probably something the humans grew called grain, and he had never eaten it before. He was sure their master would share some in time, so they should not behave so disgracefully. The Gallons listened intently and continued together, saying their master made food beyond their imagination. One of them mentioned the serpent dish Tenno had made, and Tenno felt the weight of their intense gazes. Feeling the pressure, Tenno lay back to study the grains, thinking that once the flour was ready, the first thing he would make was bread. Making bread would require yeast, and he figured he'd have to make it himself. It reminded him of his sister, who had been obsessed with baking bread and had once made him create yeast for her. he decided to think about it after the flour was ready. After reminding himself he had no proper baking tools, he suddenly muttered that the only thing in his kitchen was a stove. He would have to build a pizza oven from his wooden deck. Fortunately, he had plenty of leftover stone from digging the wine cellar. Install a layer of golden metal to insulate the wood decking and foundation. It proved incredibly sturdy, and the dog watched in shock as his Tenno used or chalcum it so casually. Tino said they needed to build a foundation lower than the decking, shaped to match the one he'd seen on TV. You finally finished building it after a lot of effort. He cooks the food in the oven, thinking he can enhance the flavor with the hot coals. After grilling it, he handed out portions to everyone, and while he ate, he found it really delicious. They both noted the meat looked more appealing, and that its texture changed just by switching the cooking method, and Karen said it was chewy with a slight bitterness, but reminded her of her group's favorite lava grilling technique. Ten smiles, satisfied with the results. Having accomplished a lot that day, he went straight to bed after dinner. Just then Sherry came in and reported that the little ones who had gone out with their master had returned with prey. The creature turned out to be an evil serpent, and they wanted Tenno to cook it for them. With all eyes on him, Tenno felt surprised and intrigued. At the castle, Miss Lost watched people preparing to leave, and he noted that many wizards and slaves were being brought along. All were determined to fulfill the king's wishes. This wonder was lost to loud weather while the fifth commander was involved, the Four. The forest would actually fall. The Gamirs denied it was possible. 10 days remained to prepare after the incident, and he wished he could have saved more of the slaves. Leaving the castle, Gamel asked if they could move any faster. With such a large caravan, it would take them half a month to reach the forest by Saturday. He said they would have less to carry on the way back, so they'd make good time. They noted and agreed to finish it before winter. Tenno stood holding a small bag of wheat he had gathered. With a wave of magic, he turned the wheat into flour and planned to make a millstone when he had time. The flour was a bit brown, but he hoped it would still work. That day he decided to make the starter. First he cleaned the bottle in 2 spoons, then mixed the starter with water. 1 spoonful of flour mixed with water. He put a cloth cover on it and left it at room temperature. It's warm enough now, so it should turn out fine. A day later, he stirred in 2 more spoonfuls of flour and water. He waited another day, and to his delight, it began to bubble and everything progressed smoothly. He only needed to add flour and water at regular intervals and watch it in the fridge. Fermentation was faster in this world, so he decided to take things one step at a time. Looking at the gallons, he realized he hadn't measured the ingredients correctly, so he decided to make a scale. Planning to make 2 identical rocks to use as weights, he split one evenly in half, then divided each half into quarters. This let him measure the ingredients precisely. With the starter ready, it was time to make the bread. 10 of us decided to use the freshly milled flour for this batch. Mix 1 part water in starter with 2 parts flour, add 1 part sugar to 10 parts water, and a pinch of salt. Continuing to work, he thought that if his memory was right, this was the correct balance. After mixing the sugar with lukewarm water, he added the starter, and since fermentation had already begun, he now had to add the flour and salt while kneading the dough. Tino was sure he was doing it right and kept mixing until it came together. As he worked, he noticed the dough looked good. The next step was to keep kneading, which he knew was the most important part of the process. Glancing at the gulms, he wondered what they were doing as he continued kneading. Curious dogs and wolves watched him. Tino said he was baking bread for the taste of it. Finished with the kneading, he felt exhausted but satisfied. He told the gallons to stop briefly because they needed to cover the dough with a damp cloth and let it rise. While the dough rested, 10 of us stepped away to gather some fruit. He said that after the dough doubled in size, it would need to be kneaded again and left to rise a second time before shaping for baking. On his return, he showed the fruit to the gallons and asked if they could eat it. After work, he checked the dough, divided it into equal portions, and put them in the oven to bake. The beasts watched intently and remarked that he was curious about what Tenno had been making over the past few days. A new, delicious smell filled the air that he had never encountered before. Shuri wondered whether it came from the grain the little ones had gone to collect. Sheev said he could not even guess what it was. At 10 o'clock, I glanced at the oven and saw that 10 minutes had passed, so it should be done. Pulling the bread out, he tasted it and found it crunchy on the outside and chewy on the inside, just as proper bread should be. Biting into his piece, Karen said it was incredible and admitted he had never known anything so delicious existed. Someone else commented that Karen seemed to really like the seeds in the bread. Another person disagreed, saying it was simply good, as expected from their master. Ko suggested he might need to rethink his view of human wisdom, but the chief disagreed, saying Tenno was remarkable simply for being himself, and Tenno smiled inwardly, feeling as if the beasts were enjoying the bread. Figuring that cheese and butter could make a pizza, he also wanted to try making crepes with only water, flour, and jam, and thought eggs and milk would be perfect. Glancing at the gulms, he saw them quietly place more bread before him. Tenno wondered what they were doing. They left without a word, leaving him to his thoughts. The next morning, Tina woke to a chill in the air, even though it was only autumn. That morning he found a fresh loaf of bread in a... He tasted it and was surprised to find it fluffier and tastier than the one he had made. Stepping outside, Tenno felt a sudden chill in the air. The weather seemed to swing between extremes. He told the gongs he hadn't seen the boss lately, and suggested they had gone underground to hibernate like Shuri and the ants. He decided to focus on the indoor tasks that needed doing. Looking at the gallons, he wondered whether they were still hauling wheat, since that would let him mill. He was surprised to find the wheat had already been enchanted. Starter supplies were running low, but several jars of fish sauce and plenty of sugar remained. He thanked the Gons for preparing the salt and oil, considered making stone knickknacks. While he hesitated, one of the gallons stepped in to take over the work. Tino insisted it was fine and that he would handle the first batch himself. Despite that, the gallant took the task from him, and Tenno, seeing no point in resisting his greed. With nothing else to do, he finally gave his kitchen the major renovation he'd meant to do for a while, expanding it out of the mountain and tripling the space. He even installed a new oven, built an entire wall of barbecue stones, and set up a pizza oven, picturing how quickly he'd be able to wash vegetables in bulk. Once everything was set up, he prepared the meal and handed it to the golems. It looked like the dry struggle was finally over. Looked at Shuri and the chief, and wondered why they were not hibernating. They said nothing and left with the little ones. Tenno suspected they had come out only to eat the fried food. The Golem approached Tenno, showed him how many barrels they had, and then presented a wooden glass filled with wine. Tenno said it was already done, and added that the wine would age quickly. He noticed a pleasant aroma and a slightly dry, sweet taste. It was very good. Drinking alone could feel lonely, but he was drinking for the night. Suddenly, 3 of the wolves from the fight were arguing over who was strongest, and he stood there shocked, unsure what had just happened. As Tenno tried to stop them, Chi joined the fight and declared himself the strongest. 10 of them wondered what was going on. Then he realized the Guln was serving wine to everyone. The Tenno could do nothing but watch. The chief told Shuri they would settle it now, and Shuri replied he would never lose to the chief. The tenant noted no magic had been used and wondered if they were supposed to be hibernating. At that moment, he saw someone fall into the river and realized he wouldn't be able to enjoy a quiet drink. Noting that Karen seemed very drunk, he saw her head in a barrel after she had fallen in. Relieved, she was thankful that Fluffy and the last lizard were still in Warmo. Ko came over, asked for more, praised how amazing it was and how good it made him feel, and asked Tenna to open another barrel. Shocked, Tino quickly refused, thinking he had done his best to make them understand that wine should be consumed only once a week. After that, he put on a jacket to go outside and found it unusually cold, even though less than half a month had passed since fall began. Gamble and his team stopped at the edge of the forest, unsure what to make of the snow ahead. They traveled to Tartarus, the nearest city to the forest, where it was snowing so heavily that Gamble stated. The mages were talking nonsense. A man feared Gamble would cut them down. He reminded the mage, telling Gamble to stop thinking of going into the forest in such weather, since they would run out of power trying to melt the snow in that heavy snowfall, even with a magic circle. Gamble cut off the reminder, saying that if it had been just them, it would not have stopped them. The man said the mages were right, since they had never seen such heavy snow before. They were fortunate to have made it back to Tartarus. The city's lord was a man named Marcus who had won the tournament and was there by the king's order. Gamble guessed they would just spend the winter there and regain their strength. They prepared to load the slaves and the animals they rode into a warehouse, and Gamble told a man to make sure the slaves had enough to eat so they would not die. A tenno cold settled over him as he watched the snakes. Then Karen appeared engulfed in flames and flying, and he was shocked. Karen stepped closer and asked if he was cold. He hugged her and said he had not been on fire. It had been only a day, and the snow had piled up a lot, something he had never experienced in Japan. Dogs and wolves played in the snow, and Tenno, watching them, noted how lively they were. Despite the barrier, he felt cold just watching them. They had so much fun playing in the snow that they joined the race. Ko said the germs seemed to have settled in nicely. Chi agreed and added it was all thanks to their master. Cole added that their master's magic had put him at ease, and that in the earlier chaotic fight with the Churani and Foamy, he would have been ready to fight, but now he did not feel like fighting them. Chase said he could communicate with them only because of their master's power, and he was truly grateful to him. At that moment, Tino petted Ko and asked if he enjoyed being petted. Ko liked the way it felt and decided his winter coat was the best. Chi did not enjoy it as much. Calling out to Ko made Ko wonder if Chi had something to say, so Ko simply told him to go ahead. Chai moved closer to Tenno, who looked confused by Chai's stare. Ko acted as if he wanted more pets, and his Tenno continued. Chase leaned his head toward Tenno's hand, looking a bit sad. Ten wondered if Chi also wanted to be petted. Ko told Chain not to trouble the master. Chair said that was not what he meant. Tino looked at Chi and said he was really cute, but Chi insisted that was not what he meant. Then Ko left went on patrol, and Chi followed him. Ko told him that even his students might envy the master. Chi was stunned to see that even though he was nearly as powerful as Fenmer, the pecking order had not changed. Atha, he wasn't too foolish to know when someone loved him. Choi believed that Ko probably wouldn't understand how he truly felt unless he said it aloud. That was one of Ko's endearing traits. He joked that Chi might groom him when he returned. They set off and Tenno wished Chi good luck, though he couldn't shake the feeling that Chi might end up in the friend zone since they were different species. The date began calmly. It was also the day of the drinking party. Tenno watched a wolf spar with Shuri and wondered if wolves took breaks from hibernation. The scuffles seemed to have become routine, and he called out for them not to get hurt. At first he worried about drinking too much, but eventually relaxed and decided to enjoy himself, taking a bite and saying he had a rush of courage and a glass of dry wine that paired perfectly. He noticed Fluffy and the flying lizard were acting normally. While they sipped wine, he was surprised to see a snowman that had somehow saved Fluffy. It was so cute he kept wondering what made it. Touching it, he thought it might be a marshmallow. He didn't know where it had come from or whether it could be one of Fluffy's friends. The three rose into the sky, leaving the wolves amazed. Tino's heart swelled at the beautiful sight. When Tino woke, he wondered if he'd had a strange dream. Soon he realized it wasn't a dream and that there really was a marshmallow. Since it might be one of them, he decided to name it. First he suggested Paul de Fluffy, but if he didn't like that name, he also suggested White. No reaction came, and the feeling remained. He vaguely remembered saying something the night before. Then he asked whether he liked the name Marshmallows. Then he jumped into the snow and found amoebae in the water. They gave off a different feeling he blamed on the snow. He wanted whether there was a difference in their magical power. Those from the water had magical power like Fluffy, and everyone with that power resembled Fluffy. He was told this wasn't just a population increase, but a whole new species emerging because of the cold. Still sleepy, Karen said he couldn't believe he'd overslept, blaming it on how delicious that drink was. It was time to switch gears and search for the dragon that day, he said. Just then he spotted the dragon lizard flying overhead. Ko looked at Karen and said that he was finally awake. Seeing the ice spirits return shocked Karen. Ko said the cold snap must mean the ice dragon had regained its power. Karen then asked whether that meant only 2 dragons were left. Chi wondered whether all the dragons would gather. Ko agreed and explained that once they did, the forest would finally be restored. He added that the dragons were naturally drawn to their master's power, implying Karen was useless. Karen called for quiet and insisted he hadn't been just looking for the dragons and that other things were needed to restore the forest. Factors that shaped the color and very existence of the forest's heart. Tenno watched them and said they had already become fast friends, so it seemed things would be fine now. Chief lifted him while he slept and carried him away from there. It made him think he was suddenly being abducted, which felt a little scary. Anna wondered whether Shuri and the others were done hibernating. He thought he'd be a good boy. Scanning the area, he wondered if this was Shuri's new nest and then saw it. They touched a block there, so I think they wanted some of the blocks to line the wall. After helping them build a walkway, he noticed spiders had arrived with the snow and decided to teleport the blocks, saying, "Use a freezer for storage. It's faster and will prevent the snow spiders from melting." Watching the amoeba and Fluffy play, he thought it would be a good idea to make repairs for the snow creatures before the snow melted. He wondered whether they were worried about the roots and about when spring would arrive. Brinkane suggested they clear that side of the river. Shuri and Chief clapped for him, and he wondered when they learned to cheer like that. At last the intense season ended, and inside, the dolls were diligently cleaning the remaining snow, while the wolves. They were successfully catching prey to bring back to their den. Tenno thanked them for their efforts and noted that some appeared not to have been hunting lately. The scene shifts to Gammers, where a man came up to him and asked if he had heard the rumors. Gammers looked over some papers and asked about the nature of these rumors. The man whispered that the rumor said if they abused the slaves they would be cursed and suffer the forest's wrath, and that it was an incredibly foolish rumor. He asked Gammers whether he agreed or thought those beasts could do it, and Gammers replied that the man should not say that in front of the king. Hearing this, the man hesitated, and Gammers called it disrespectful. The man quickly clarified that he had no intention of doing that. The Gammers said he was only joking, and that he knew how loyal the man was to the king. The man agreed but told Gammers not to intimidate him that way, saying he was a lieutenant and deserved support. Another person present said the remark by Gammers was uncalled for. As the two left, Gamer thought the man was loyal to the king, so the man must not find out. Meanwhile, a slave told the others they could find edible plants there. He showed them an image of an evil serpent and warned it could leap up to twice its body length, saying their lives depended on remembering this. Tino cut timber into logs, while the Gons carried them away to build the border of their garden. 10 Oppas, noting it should be done soon, and work moved quickly. He figured everyone was eager after a long winter with little to do. Everyone kept working and thought spring had motivated the others so much that he had almost nothing left to do. Lately, only about half of them went out to hunt, and whenever he saw him, he seemed fine. Just then, a wolf approached, and Tenno began petting it. Then he saw So and said it had been a while since he last saw her. He looked. Her stomach felt odd, and he wondered if she was pregnant, but since it was spring, he figured it was natural. That was how things went. Those events made him feel a little lonely, and he almost forgot he needed to look for the edge of the forest. Worried they might not have enough food with so many offspring on the way, he felt uneasy. He checked the food supplies to see if that was all they had left. The provisions in the storage room had gotten everyone through the winter. They might consider expanding the field. Then he looked at the Gons' excited faces. A few days later, he saw the offspring of various animals, including wolves and squirrels. He was glad they had several successful births during those few days and thought the baby was cute. Ko's offspring looked almost identical to their parents, and it still surprised him that Ko was now a mother. Turning to Chai, he said he had crossed interracial barriers and appreciated it. Venturing into the forest, he said it was pleasant and that he needed to do his part for their growing family. With the farm crew busy on the new fields, he decided to enlarge the storage room, though he found it odd that about half of the new fields seemed strange. Using his magic, he touched the walls and then helped the golems. While he rested, another new creature appeared. It was breathtaking. Tino recognized it as a phasmatodia, the world's largest insect, and this one was undoubtedly about 10 times larger than any he had seen before. At that moment, Karen arrived and said she had managed to find them. That left no doubt she had proven her value to Tenno. Tenno wondered why she seemed so proud of it, and lately he felt they had been puffing out their chests a lot. She survived and explained that those creatures were trance, the spirits of the trees. Karen agreed and said the tree spirits had returned, so the world tree had likely revived too. 10A watched them converge and wondered what was happening. The new creature motioned for Tenno to follow it outside, and Tenno wondered why it wanted to go that way. Approaching together, he explained he had come because he sensed a strange magic. Magic seemed to be calling the Tenno. He felt a strange magical power and wanted to know what it was. All of them went that way, and the tenant felt the strange feeling growing stronger. They came to a stop before a huge tree, and Tina was surprised to see it. Shuri couldn't believe it. It was the first time in his life he'd seen a tree like that. Also stated with certainty that the world tree controlled the heart of that forest. Karen said she had heard it was protected by many barriers, and only the chosen could approach it. Chief said he once felt its presence throughout the forest. Looking closer, Tenno said it seemed to be withering. Ko explained it had kept the forest safe from human attacks for a long time, but was now running out of strength, and Shuri Greed hoped their master's magic could restore it. Hennel studied the grasshopper-like creatures, wondering whether they were waiting for him to act. Sensing his magic draining, he chose to keep it flowing. At that moment, leaves began breaking off and falling to the ground. Tenno and the others were subdued. I'm surprised and not sure this was supposed to happen. The other creature looked unwell, and Tina did not know what to do. Ko told Tina he had to make a plan, and Karen agreed. Many leads led to the next episode. They had fallen, and when his leg brushed one, it began to shine. He wondered what was happening and found nothing there. Then he noticed a small tree creature beside him. Moving away, Tenna saw the creature following them. He suspected a tree monster since everyone was acting strange. Karen thought their master's magic might be mixing with the trees, and Shari said it was the world tree. I'm asked Ko if that thing is safe, and as Ko nods in agreement, Tenno concedes, wondering where he is. Leaving it would be fine, since creating a new clearing would interfere with the Marshmallow's basement room. Back home, the new creatures seemed happy to get into Fluffy's lake. Seeming to enjoy it, the small tree creature plunged its roots into the ground by the lake and grew rapidly, surprising Tenno. He said it was amazing and wondered if that was how the world's trees became crude. It felt a little scary to him, but they had made a new friend. Gamble and his team fought fiercely, cutting down the beasts. Gamble cut down a dragon and said the hunt had been incredibly boring. He hadn't expected to need only half their subordinates, knowing ferocity was the only redeeming quality of these beasts. They were setting up a magic circle to break the barrier around the forest perimeter. A voice warned that the barrier had multiple layers and urged them to hurry. Gamble declared the time was nearly here, and they would soon show those bastards in the forest the power of the strongest emperor. One person asks how they should cook the forest ruler when it shows its face. Another replies that it is a beast and they should charge extra and present it to the king. Gamble believes his truth about his handicap will now be fearless and unlike the other orders. They were the king's knights, yet all were cowards. Some people find the forest different, but that shouldn't be a problem. Whatever frightened the Fourth Order of Knights so badly still puzzles him and leaves him unsure whether they were real knights. He would have beaten them if they had not stopped him. A man told him not to go, calling him Sockbot, and it reminded him of how he used to be. They told him the mages were asking why their force composition seemed so odd. Gamble says the incompetent ones need to think about it more. Every attack was aimed at the castle's ancient magic stone. Even when it broke the king's sword, it must have been drawing on the stone's power, and if forest attacks were targeting the stones, so they had to avoid using them and rely on other offensive spells. No high-ranking mage arrived, and the day could require sacrifices to raise their power. He told everyone to listen. They planned to break the barrier around the forest with the 2 magic circles, light it with the torch, and let everything they saw burn. Everyone agreed. Gamble said the forest had barriers to keep the beast in, so they would have to burn it from the outside, working in words. Someone asked him to save some for them too, and Gamble admired their spirit and reassured them they would have plenty of chances to shine. He realized the extra man had arrived and that he had learned from his mistake. Now all the slaves were under 5, and the trash who hadn't been trained to fight would just be dead. If something went wrong and they escaped, they would become prey in the forest. He looked at the cage and thought the drugs appeared to be working. They might have been trash, but serving the king was a privilege. The scene shifts to Tenno, who watches the Kidwolds play with magic. Tenement noticed they were growing so fast that, at just a week old, they were already playing dangerously. He figures it will be fine with their mother watching over them. Usually has a lot of free time and wonders whether more amoebae have moved into the field. Each day he makes his rounds to check on his companions. He wasn't just playing around, he was taking a nap. Those new creatures took him to the tree, and he said it was as majestic as ever. Still unsure what the stick insects were trying to tell him, he knew that if he skipped even a day they would come for him looking sad. He could see the tree growing before his eyes and thought that everything in the world grows up so fast. Another peaceful day had arrived, and he thought he might go gather leaves to make tea. The scene shifts to Gamble's magic circle, where the mages chant and the slaves sit in their places. A man tells Gamma it's almost time and wonders if they will fight back. Gamma replied he would cut down anyone who defies the king. Let's see what would happen, on the other hand. In 10 of the films, something strange happens, and he says he has a bad feeling. At that moment, the stick insect's figures ran toward him on 6 legs, which surprised him, and he wondered whether it was the right time for that, and whether something had happened to the. Standing by the tree, he wondered whether the magic lay in chaos, and whether healing would work. It seemed like it would help a little, but it only gave temporary relief. Cocaine asked whether that was some kind of attack on them. Tenon realized even Cole was worried, but he'd never seen him like that before, so he didn't know what it meant. It died again, and that might be the end of the forest. He worried it might take root in a bad spot, but it chose the spot itself. Tenno had heard fungus in poor soil could damage a tree, but he wasn't an expert and would just fix everything. Treating it as an outside attack, he would use his magic to boost the tree's immune system to its maximum. Pests might be in the roots, so he would boost its defenses. When he used his power, his companions were shocked to see it, and Ko said the world tree was being enveloped in their master's magic. Now Tenno had to find the source of the problems and stop it. Pests and fungi spread through soil, so he should search a wide area to trace their origins and use a wide area check filter. A look at the leaves showed it was working, and the tree's power had stabilized. Other trees could be affected, so treating them seemed necessary, but he abandoned that plan and decided it was better to remove the root cause by isolating whatever the tree creatures regarded as enemies. At the castle, Gammer sat going over papers and expected more investigation requests from the outlying villages, since a mysterious light streaking across the sky for several days would naturally be unsettling. Without concrete evidence, he was sure the phenomenon was affecting the magic stones. Just then, a man entered the room with lust in his eyes and asked Gamers if he had heard the news. Gamers replied that if you mean the fifth reaching the forest, yes, I've heard. Mislo said news travels fast, the man already had it, and the forest is finished now. Gamers didn't look pleased. That was exactly the problem, he said. Even the fourth had managed to get that far when they invaded the forest. After Mislo's pointed them out, they were attacked. Gamers responded despite being hit by that light. Were there any injuries or deaths? Did only the slate manage to escape? Ms. Loss was about to speak, but the Gamers kept going, likely as a warning, and only the truly strong can afford that luxury. Consider what comes after a warning. The boy guessed and the attack. The Gamers nodded. You should watch the timing closely. The fifth intrusion could give the forest the reason it needs to strike back at that country. The man clenched his fists and said coldly that he would burn it all down. The scene shifts to Tenno, who thought the hidden forest killed anyone who came too close, and he analyzed the target's side effects to see what was wrong. He burned every insect and fungus to ash. Gamble warned the attack was coming and that the devils had turned the tables on them, so they had to show the devils what awaited them. A man said he would kill them all. Upon arrival, they wondered where the slaves were. Suddenly a bright light flashed and they couldn't see anything. They could see again and found the mages burning. Gamble then summoned water to stop it. When that failed, Gamble asked the person skilled in magic to put out the fire. They tried, but nothing worked, and the fire kept growing. The game will ask the others to step back, and then the whole magic circle will burn. Still, the slaves remained in the prisoner carriage by the fire. He moved to Tenno and found the tree looked happier. He wondered what else he could do, and whether the injection had already reached its system, and considered using what was left as fertilizer. After an internal check, he pulped and absorbed the target. In Gamma, he hears a sound and wonders what it is. A man explains it's the barrier removal magic circle. Gamble warned them to approach carefully. As they moved forward, they saw the ground turn completely black. Gamma wondered if they were joking and was completely shocked to see it all. The scene shifts to Tenno, who watches the tree grow larger and leans back completely relaxed. He said the magic had stabilized, so he thought it was fine now, though his heart kept pounding. It was the first time he'd been that panicked, to keep them from touching his friends. By contrast, Gamble's team fell there, and all of them felt completely different. Gamma looked around, trying to figure out what was happening. It was hard to believe. Slaves left there too. A mage reads papers and reports, and learns that the fifth unit has managed to penetrate the forest. With so many mages accompanying them, they should make it back safely. While searching the records, the mage found nothing on strengthening the magic stone except by sacrifice, and those accounts described blood magic. The record said assembling the magic stone required 700 lives, about 100 more for the visual magic range, and roughly 7,000 lives over 100 years. The more he read about it, the more futile it seemed. Gamers in the room with Mislost and another man said he was shown that the forest would fully recognize them as enemies, which constituted an invasion. But he felt it was already too late. The man was about to speak when a sudden pressure knocked them all to the ground. Even the others in the castle felt the same. Gammer said it felt like someone was squashing him, and at that pace he could die, but he couldn't afford it yet. The aged man reading the records felt the same and thought he didn't want to die. He concluded that 200 slaves were not enough to strengthen the magic stone, so they would have to raise the rate to compensate. Reviewing the documents he had submitted, he couldn't understand why they hadn't used beastmates to produce more. He learned some sleepers still cried, even after their emotions were suppressed, which intrigued him and made him think about forgiveness. Ganners struggled to stand, thinking about the other two. He found Miss Lost unharmed and the other man injured but still breathing. The world's king's wrath had spilled beyond the forest borders. Sage coughed, thought it had stopped, and then wondered about the others. The Dadars were alive, and the person reading the report contemplated pure wrath. They wondered whether they had provoked someone's anger. He believed the world would not forgive them. The sage went to tell others that something had happened to the king and urged them to help. He then asked that the intruders be executed. Another sage thought that except for the king's trusted daughter and his granddaughter, anyone entering his bedchamber was unusual. The king did not necessarily trust them. They entered, and a sage announced he had brought that person. The king screamed in pain, saying he had heard it and urging them to hurry and heal him. His hand was cut off, and between sobs he talked about his former body and asked how it had happened. The mages asked the other person to heal their king, and that person agreed and began healing the king's arm. They thought it wasn't their kind, and working on it felt like scooping water with a sieve, making almost no progress. The king's body should have been the strongest, but something had changed, and all they could do was cover the wound. After that, the healer left and told the person closing the door that if the magic stone had been perfect, none of this would have happened. The second person wondered why they couldn't find any way to repair the same magic stone. The scene shifts to the forest, where everything was fine. While the pups played, Tenno noticed they had quickly grown to the size of ordinary dogs. Next, he focused on the tree spirits, the stick insects, and Eco the tree. He thought he had named the tree Eco because it felt different from the others. A month and a half had passed, and the dream seemed much healthier. He wondered what caused that massive growth spurt. Surveying the forest, he said everything had clearly changed. He did say so. Not sure they'd call it mana. He felt each individual source of mana in the forest more clearly than before, and since Eco's recovered, things had been slowly changing. Since everyone was fine with it, he assumed it was a good sign that the forest was no longer the same.